Everybody, it's December the 28th, 2024. Peter Boyles on the air everywhere, and the weather's good, man. Saturday weather, 54 will be the high today, 31 degrees tonight, 58 degrees on Sunday, and 47 degrees on Monday. It is good to be here. At times like this, I turn to this man, David Smith, lecturer in history at, of course, Baylor University. And the issue is Panama. And on New Year's, on Christmas Eve, I was reading a lengthy piece that Richard Nixon, that Donald Trump wanted to take back the Panama Canal. Please say good morning and welcome back to the radio show. Professor David Smith is our guest. Good morning, sir, and thanks for doing it. So I'm waiting for the professor to come shining through. There he is. Hey, Professor Smith, thanks for doing the show again, and welcome back.
Hey, Peter, Merry Christmas to you and yours.
You know, you too. What, you guys have a good Christmas?
Yeah, we did. You know, we're just kind of hanging out at the house, not traveling, and it just felt really good.
I feel the same way about Christmas. I was up in Winter Park in the mountains, but it was like, this is just as good as home, and watch people, you know, and just take it easy. Remember, boy, Christmas has really changed.
It really has. You think it's because we're getting older?
Oh, there's no question. I have a grandson. You have to peel him off the wall, you know. You know, little guys get about Christmas, and no, I'm going, okay, Christmas, you know, and he's going, all these things are going to happen. So anyhow, Professor Smith has been a wonderful friend of ours. I met him, I think, during the Audie Murphy book that he had done, and he's just always been with us at moments like this. So I'm reading about Donald Trump and about Panama.
Right.
And I'm thinking, how many people really do know the history of the United States of America and Panama?
Not too many, I don't think. I'm not sure they teach it in schools. I mean, the students that I get have heard of Panama, but that's sometimes about as far as it goes. It's an incredible story that goes way back.
All right, so let us begin. Even back before TR and the Panama Canal.
You know, I always start the story of the Panama Canal with the story of the Suez Canal. You know, the canal that links the Red Sea and the Mediterranean that the French built and opened in 1869. And it transformed the Mediterranean. It transformed Britain's relationship with India. It transformed Britain's relationship with the Eastern Mediterranean. It certainly transformed British interest in Africa. And you look at a map of the world, and the next place you look at for something like that is Panama, right? The Isthmus of Panama, the narrowest place, right, where the Caribbean and the Pacific meet. And by 1880, the French were working on a canal in Panama, which was a state of Colombia at that time. And for a decade and a half, the French worked on it, and their engineering, I don't think anybody's engineering was up to it yet. And finally, the French sort of gave up and sold out their interest in it.
And then, also, they were getting sick.
Oh goodness, yeah. They had thousands of people die every month who were working on the canal. Most of the people who dug the canal were people from Jamaica.
Well, that was what was interesting, and what Donald Trump said. Donald Trump said 38,000 of our people died. And I went, no. And
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
No, I mean, a lot of Americans went down there to oversee the work.
Right.
But it was Caribbean islanders who had signed on with the French company.
That's right.
And they died by the thousands.
You know, I have read this about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that why the Louisiana Purchase happened. And the story goes at least like this from what I read. So there's been a slave revolt and what's the guy's name? Doverson, I think, but I'm probably wrong.
Yeah, Toussaint Louverture.
Yes.
In Haiti.
And the French send their military to Haiti, and their military gets sick, and Napoleon's military gets sick and dies.
Yeah, the outsiders from Europe can't handle the conditions in the Caribbean.
And he needs money to fight the British in Europe. And so he sells it to Jefferson.
Jefferson wanted just to buy New Orleans at first. He was worried about navigation on the Mississippi. And he just happened to have his representative approach Napoleon at the right time that Napoleon was thinking this. And Napoleon said, I'm not going to sell you New Orleans, but I will sell you the entirety of the territory. And if you don't buy it, I'll sell it to the British.
Yeah.
And he knew how to manipulate Jefferson.
And yet he's at war with the British.
And
it's interesting because it's, the Spanish flu of the First World War, the Black Death that comes to Europe, the Red Death that comes to Europe, the whatever it is, the probably mosquitoes that kill Napoleon's army. It just keeps. I mean, we just came through COVID,
right?
And
I remember you and I talked right as the COVID thing started to break. We talked about pandemics and how these things come along, and you can't really predict them. But the only thing about malaria was that outsiders to tropical regions knew that if you go there, if you send your soldiers there, they're going to get this and die.
Why do you think Napoleon goes ahead to? He's crushing a slave rebellion, correct?
He's trying to.
Okay.
And it's tough to do, and it would involve a huge expeditionary force, and basically he can't spare the time.
And he sends, if I remember correctly, something like 13,000 of his best, and they die. That
number sticks in my head too.
And so he's stuck, and now he turns to Jefferson, and who really only wants to buy New Orleans, right? But he said it's all or nothing at all.
Yep. And then we get the entirety of the Louisiana Territory, and one of Jefferson's sort of hallmark achievements, I think.
Well, what was it? I was trying to explain this to somebody, where they did the population shift, where the Evangeline, when it's been millions of years since I read that, but they took, what was it, the French, then go to Montreal, or who moves?
Let's see. That's good. I know that in 1763, way back in 1763, when Canada became British, a group of French people didn't want to become British, and they relocated to Louisiana.
And those are the Cajuns.
Those are the Cajuns, right, from Arcadia.
Right.
I don't know. I should know this. I don't know what kind of population shift happened after the United States bought Louisiana, though. I think the French kind of stayed.
That's what I thought. But I thought there was these people that came. They came north to south, and they became known as the Cajuns.
Right. And the people in Louisiana who had lived there for a long time did not like
not at all. And
that's why the Cajun culture is so distinctive
and so set aside.
Yeah, because its roots are in French Canada.
And that's all, again, part of what happens when the mosquitoes eat the French soldiers.
Yeah, and then the United States winds up with the port of New Orleans that becomes, that becomes the leading port of the United States on the Gulf of Mexico, which magnifies the importance first of the Monroe Doctrine and then of the Panama Canal.
And the Monroe Doctrine later reappears with Jack Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev in the missile crisis in Cuba.
Absolutely. And Reagan with troops in Grenada.
That's right. Ronald Reagan enacts, and I think it's called the Truman Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, and he enacts it on in Grenada. No, isn't it one? I mean, this is what I love about you and love about my passion, amateur passion of history. One thing is, and I use the term nexus. One seems to be a nexus to the next.
Mm-hmm.
And
the Truman Doctrine. There are too many doctrines. Mm-hmm. The Truman Doctrine was about Greece and Turkey in the Cold War, and it's the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine that he announces in 2005 or something like that sends the gunboat diplomacy into action in the Caribbean.
And then they give aid in the Greek Civil War, and they aid the non-Marxist side.
Yeah, it's the United States foreign policy is a whole lot more adventurous than most people think it is. Agreed. Back in the 1800s.
Agreed.
Yeah. Everybody thinks that the United States sort of just burst on the scene in 1945, but holy cow, not at all.
Not at all. So there's a republic how do they separate Panama from Colombia? That was my next question.
Yeah, Panama as a region of Colombia had carried out periodic rebellions against Colombia, sort of like how Cuba carried out periodic rebellions against Spain. And the last one before the French got out there was a revolution there in Panama in 1885, and the Colombians sort of crushed it. And so when Theodore Roosevelt begins negotiating for the rights to build the canal after he becomes president, he negotiates these rights with Colombia, with the Colombian government. And Colombia, he thinks he's got an agreement, he thinks he's reached a conclusion, and then the Colombian government, from his point of view, changes the terms.
Yeah.
And that makes him mad. That's a double cross in the eyes of Theodore Roosevelt. And then he backs the United States under Roosevelt then backs a new rebellion against Colombia and sends in the gunboats, and Colombia says, so this is going to be how it is. And then Colombia recognizes the independence of Panama, and voila, Panama turns around and gives the Americans everything that they wanted for the canal.
Did TR steal Panama?
No, I don't think I wouldn't describe it that way. I mean, if you're going to describe it that way, you've got to use the word steal a bunch of other times too.
Okay,
no, he didn't. He helped in the independence of Panama largely for the purpose of the United States building and controlling the canal.
When this is going to lead to the Spanish-American War.
It follows in the footsteps of the Spanish-American War, actually.
Yeah. So, I mean, the struggle in the United States, although acting like this benevolent big brother, really is a colonialist, or is it a colonialist?
Well, it's throwing its power around like a colonialist. And it's interesting. I was just working on this last night in the book I'm working on. The definition of empire is starting to change right around this time. And what's becoming more important and more a component of empire are things like trading routes and sea lines of communication and dependable coal bases. So America sort of comes in this as a new imperialist, having little spots around the globe rather than big territories like India or Brazil or Canada. It's a new kind of imperialism.
Are there companies that are formed like British East India or does the United States form corporations that will do the bidding of the British, and the British are not unlike the British
Sort of on that
government?
model.
Very much so. Yeah.
You know what? I like how you phrase that, because what the United States does is form private corporations that develop political influence, and then the private corporations, like the fruit companies and the tobacco companies and the sugar companies,
you bet,
then they basically buy enough influence in Washington to have American foreign policy shaped to their benefit.
United Fruit is, in my reading, the United Fruit appears and reappears.
Yeah, that's the one in the Caribbean, I think, right? And
yes,
and the Dole Fruit Company is the one out in Hawaii.
Dole's DOLE.
Yeah.
Who's the queen they overthrow?
I know her name, but I never can say it out loud.
And it's also coincides with Arizona becoming a state, correct?
What's going on down there in Arizona? I don't think Arizona becomes a state till like 1912.
That's what I thought. But I thought that Stanford
I wasn't
Dole,
ready for a quiz.
but Stanford Dole and those guys had gone to Hawaii.
And there's an attempted coup in Hawaii that President Harrison agrees with, but then he's out of office, and the incoming president withdraws the annexation treaty in 93, and then the United States doesn't annex Hawaii until 98.
So with the intentions of building the Panama Canal, the U.S. does our country intervene because there's a revolt taking place inside of what's Colombia, Panama, Nicaragua? It's hard to name it, or it's hard to name it yet.
Yeah, right. The United States intervenes in the Panamanian Revolution of '03, largely for the purpose of having an independent Panama that will give the United States the rights to build and operate the canal.
And the canal's not even been built yet.
No, it doesn't open until 1914.
So the United States gives aid to a country that's just being formed called Panama. How does that go down with the Colombians and Ecuadorians? And didn't they do the deal where they put the stamp of Nicaragua, and they invented a stamp that had like volcanoes on it to try and scare people off?
That seems familiar. Yeah. I think I've seen something like that.
Yeah.
But Colombia, as its government, doesn't want to tangle with the United States. And basically, getting a good read on Theodore Roosevelt basically says, okay, we'll back off. It was a fight they didn't want to press.
So how soon does the First World War begin for the United States?
So let me think about this. The construction of the canal begins in '04.
Right.
The canal opens in the summer of 14. World War I begins in the summer of 14. And the United States gets in World War I in the spring of 17.
So it's all relative, because I read the book The Pathway Between the Seas, which is
McCullough's book.
Oh man, what a book!
Yeah, that's a great book.
But and guys are dying. But when Donald Trump said 38,000 of our guys, they were not our guys, were they?
No. They were just employees of the companies that were building the canal.
Right.
And I mean, the United States companies had been supplying steam shovels to the French back in the 1880s. So the American businesses had ties to it. And the American businesses wanted that canal to get from the Atlantic to the Pacific. And there were people in the U.S. Navy who understood that our position fronting the Atlantic and fronting the Pacific would give us a predominant interest in that canal that somebody like Britain wouldn't necessarily have.
Can you hang on, sir, while I do a couple things, and we'll come right back? Our guest, the one, the only, David Smith, professor of history at Baylor University. And when I saw this story pop up on giving or taking back Panama, I thought, does anybody know the history of this? It's almost like, and I'm not, it's more of a comparison than, well, perhaps it's an analysis. I doubt that George W. Bush cracked a book on the history of Afghanistan before he began what he began. I doubt if he read anything about the Soviet-Russian experience in Afghanistan before he and Cheney launched. And this is one of those moments I'd like to say to President Trump, watch this. I'm happy today to talk to you about our friends at Water Pros, and Water Pros cares about the quality of your water. You can remove forever chemicals and microplastics and hard water, and Water Pros are there. The Peter Boyles special. You get a whole water softener and point of use reverse osmosis drinking water system there. Get that out. Fully installed. Start the process. Go to waterpros.net and sign up for your in-home consultation. But take the free one. The free one is the test. They come to your home, they test your water, they answer all of your questions, all your concerns about your water. I trust these guys. They're our friends. You will trust them as well. Water Pros is a family-operated and veteran-operated business dedicated to providing you with the best in water treatment for less than the other guys, and it's better. Do this. You know, holidays have come and almost gone. 303-862-5554, 303-862-5554, 303-862-5554, waterpros.net. Good morning, everyone, on a Saturday, the 28th of December, 2024. 710 KNUS Weather Center weather. 54 will be the high, 58 tomorrow on Sunday. 710 KNUS, and our guest is, of course, Professor David Smith. Later on in the morning in Open Lines, I want to ask you about what you think of artificial intelligence. Does it scare you? And I was reading a lot of different shock pieces about it, and I thought it'd be a good Open Lines topic. In the meantime, Professor Smith from Baylor is our guest. He's always wonderful. We were talking about a remark that Donald Trump made about taking back, quote unquote, back the Panama Canal. I had a conversation with somebody, what day was it? It was Wednesday. And I said, suppose the Mississippi River that divided our country was a canal or water passage, which of course it is, and it was owned by the French, and the French claimed it was theirs. How do you think the same people that say, go grab that canal, would say if there was a French canal right through the heart of this country?
Yeah, exactly. Think about, the Albany Canal. Remember that one?
Oh, sure.
Up in New York, what if a French company had built the Albany Canal in the 1820s instead of the Americans? And the Americans, were using the canal, and then the French said, well, we want it back now.
Yeah.
It wouldn't go over too well.
No, or like I always thought the Mississippi River was because, it guts the country, and suppose.
Yeah, and it was once, at least one bank of the Mississippi was French for a long time.
That's right.
Well, and Spanish too,
Yeah.
right? It's long history.
And so they said, well, that's really ours. We'd like it back.
Yeah, we had this same debate in the 1970s when the Carter administration, responding to an enormous amount of unrest in Latin America. I don't know if people remember how much unrest there was in Latin America and animosity toward the U.S. in the 70s. But Carter began negotiations to sort of return the canal back to Panama as a way of helping the U.S. with all of the relations of Central America. And this was a time, remember, when the Soviet Union and Cuba were together too. So we needed all the diplomatic help in the region we could get. And the Carter administration negotiated these treaties, and the Senate ratified them in 1978. And you probably remember Reagan campaigned hard against it. Reagan was the one who said, how did he put it? We built it. We operated it. It's ours.
Yeah, it's ours.
And there was a huge fight over it, but it's been stable ever since.
When does the actual dig begin?
The dig begins, well, I guess I should say, the United States takes over the effort to dig the canal in 1904. There were parts of it that had been built by the French back in the 1880s, but the United States takes over the building of the canal in 04 and gets it open in 10 years.
Wow.
It's a tremendous engineering feat. It's just incredible.
You ever seen it?
I've never seen it. Have you?
Yeah. Like 5 different times actually, but
oh wow, I would love to go through it.
You can sit on it's on the Atlantic side. No, I take it back. It's on the Pacific side, and it's called Melliflores, the many flowers, I think it means, and it's the last lock before the ocean. Oh, and they have bleachers. And
wow,
you go in, and we went in and sat in the more than once, and it's like I watched, and you're not sure what anything is, but the ships rise right up out of the water because they're coming up on the locks it was a Russian ship, and there was a kind of heavy set woman sitting out on the deck. She was peeling potatoes. I waved at her, and she waved at her, and no, it's amazing to watch it.
The only canal I've ever watched like that was in the Netherlands, and I would stand there and watch the water rise up and the ship sail out one end and a ship come in and then go down and sail out the other end. It's fascinating.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and I always say, I remember sitting there and thinking how old this is, that these doors are and how old these gears are. And then they have little engines that pull the ships. And I sat there all day, just with another guy. We just watched it. And I thought,
I would do that too. It would fascinate me to the point that people would be saying, "Can we leave now?" And I'd say, well, "No, we can't. We got to watch this."
Yeah. Oh, it takes your breath away to watch it and thinking how old it is.
Mm-hmm. And the Suez Canal didn't have locks at all. The Suez Canal was a sea level canal. And I think the French thought the Panama Project would be easier. And even aside from the fact that thousands of people died every year and they had trouble getting people to work on it, but the altitude, right, and the mountains they had to go over made it a fundamentally different undertaking.
Wow. There's a railroad that runs, and it's a real old railroad, and it runs right next to it.
Yep. And that was there first.
Yeah. And the story that I was told was, gold seekers and adventurers and gamblers and people that were trying to get to California.
Yep.
From the East Coast would walk it, or,
they would before the railroad was there.
Yeah.
You can find ads in Eastern newspapers like New York and Philly and Boston, in which you can buy a ticket to get to the gold fields of California, in which you would go from New York to Panama and then across Panama, and then you'd get on another steamship and you'd go up the coast to California.
Yeah.
And they had basically like a continual mule train going across the 47 miles of Panama.
Wow. Our guest, the one and only Professor David Smith, Baylor University. Donald Trump makes the remark. How about the Greenland remark too? I thought, and he says stuff. And
what must the countries of Europe think when things like that get said?
I tell you my theory, which is probably he and Vince McMahon are very good friends. And Vince McMahon built the biggest, finest professional wrestling machine in the history of mankind. And if you watch some of those tapes, you'll see Donald Trump like shaving Vince's head. You see Donald Trump slapping Vince. I'm not convinced, seriously, I'm not convinced that Donald Trump doesn't take some of the professional wrestling stuff and he does it, and he just goons people. And I mean, he knows, I think, somewhere that there's no way in hell he's going to go get the canal back. And because now the Panamanians are all up in smoke, they're just, well, nobody can do that to us. And then they got this whole alliance of Latin American countries. No, you'll never take the Panama Canal. So he says, okay, I'll take Iceland. I mean, I'll take Greenland. I mean, I kind of see him operating that way.
Yeah. And I think that whenever he doesn't like the press coverage he's getting, he says something like that, and it forces the whole coverage to change. And now people are talking about this thing about Panama or Greenland or whatever, and they're not talking about something that he would rather them not talk about.
Yeah. Is he talking to Netanyahu? I think he is the president of the United States as we speak. I think he speaks to Putin 4 or 5 times a week. I think he has a ongoing phone call with Netanyahu. Do you believe those things are possible?
I believe they're possible, sure. I believe other foreign leaders feel like they can probably get what they want better from a Trump administration than from an administration of anybody else.
Can I, and another one of those, then I'm going to come back to it. The responsibility that the press had to point out what kind of shape Joe Biden was in or is
Uh-huh.
in. But then I was telling somebody, although they're totally unrelated, but they are, the press covered up for FDR being in a wheelchair.
Oh yeah, and JFK for being as sick as he was.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's strange, because I think of the press as having a good relationship with FDR and a good relationship with JFK, but I wouldn't have expected the press to have that kind of relationship with Biden.
No. But they had to know, did they not, Doctor?
I don't know. I mean, you and I don't know how
that's true.
managed that access is.
Yeah.
You and I don't know. We haven't, we don't experience what kind of access the press pool has to the president when he's having a down day.
Ooh.
So I don't blame the press for not knowing, but I kind of blame the press for not poking a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean,
and I worry that the press won't poke in the second Trump administration.
The physicality, if that's the right word to use, of Joe Biden, you can. My principal physician has become a great friend, and he calls it sundowning. That when oftentimes those guys wake up in the morning, the lights are on, they're doing well, and by the time noon or 1 o'clock hits, they're through.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. And I think that's probably something that most people who interact with senior citizens are pretty familiar with.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good.
And it's, it was the case. Remember back in 2020 that Biden said he would be a transitionary figure.
Yes.
And he went into that with that sort of, we thought that was the plan, and it didn't turn out that way.
Nope.
So you had 4 years in which no other Democratic politician was really positioning him or herself to be the leader of the party. And then when Biden's condition becomes evident, the party is just completely flat-footed.
Does the United States of America, on any or all levels, control the Panama Canal anymore?
No, not at all.
That's right.
I mean, no more than we control the Suez Canal.
Yeah.
But the Panama Canal is internationally neutral, and everybody can use it. But back in the 70s, the stipulation was that if American warships need it, American warships can go to the front of the line, and that's still the case.
Do you believe the Chinese are there working on the canal?
No, the Chinese have port facilities.
Yeah.
Actually, Hong Kong had port facilities on the Pacific, and then Hong Kong became part of China. So the Chinese have port facilities on the Pacific coast. I do not think they do on the Atlantic coast yet, but they want, they're trying to position themselves in the Caribbean just like we did. But no, they don't have people along the canal.
So you are Xing out these charges. I've listened and watched a couple of Congress people. The Chinese are running the canal, and I went,
no, the Chinese aren't running the canal any more than we are.
Yeah. I mean, I've watched the canal run, and it's really cool to watch it run, but
yeah,
I don't think there's Chinese guys down there running it.
No, not at all. And the greatest threat to the canal right now is the drought that Panama is facing.
Yes.
Because the canal needs a huge amount of fresh water to fill those locks. And that's in part why the rates have ticked up for passage to try to get fewer ships to go through there, because there's just not the water to keep it as busy as it could be.
Well, Panama, could Panama, or is Panama a partner in stopping illegal immigration from South America?
is Panama a partner
Yeah.
in stopping illegal immigration from South America? I mean, I guess it could be.
Yeah.
I mean, it could prevent people from using its borders.
Yeah.
But I mean, immigrants from South America going north could bypass Panama pretty easily.
And Panama, the politics of Panama with Noriega and Trujillo and those guys, they weren't they put on the throne by the CIA or by Herbert Walker Bush, and didn't he put Noriega on the throne in Panama?
I'd have to look back into that, but I know that and you know this too.
Sure.
Within the context of the Cold War, there was going to be nobody ruling Panama that the United States didn't approve of.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same way that we didn't want somebody ruling Chile that we didn't approve of, and the CIA gets involved in that.
Right.
But the United States vis-a-vis Panama was, after 45, was driven by the Cold War to make sure that whoever ran Panama was our man. And that makes it hard for the leader of Panama to be popular with his own people.
Yeah.
Right? If you've got the reputation of being a puppet of another country, there's going to be some people in your country who don't like that.
Well, that was Noriega.
Yeah.
Who when I was there, they called El Pino, the pineapple.
Is that right?
That was his jacket. And he was, he'd always dressed as a paratrooper. And I spent enough time down there to be around a lot of people. And they say, watch him on television. And on television, he's like what's called standing in the door. And then the next shot, he's on the ground. Uh-huh. You never saw him jump. I mean, I'm serious. They put that out. Watch this. And he was very, very self-promoting on Panamanian television. And,
yeah, I bet that's right.
And that's when I met the Zonies, and I thought it worked pretty well.
Yeah, and the United States controlled the Panama Canal zone, and if you were born there, you were a U.S. citizen, right? John McCain was born there. Right?
John McCain was born there.
Yeah, so people who were born in the canal zone were American citizens.
Yep, they were.
But in the 70s, the international diplomacy was such that the tides returned it to Panama.
Yep. And
it's been exclusively Panamanian property and Panamanian run since, when was it? 1999 was the last bit of U.S. influence.
Jimmy Carter. But it was,
and the treaties were ratified in 78 to be completed by 1999. We had like 20 years to affect the turnover.
You should see it. I mean,
it's run fine.
You can see where the white people lived, and there are these they're mansions. And
it would have been like the British in Bangladesh or something.
Absolutely, that's the first thing I thought. And they call those people the zonies. They live in the zone.
I didn't know that.
And there's fencing, and there are these really beautiful established Southern antebellum homes, and that's where the supervisors of and they never left.
Mm-hmm.
And they are the zonies, and they live there, and they vote, and they live their lives, and they're by and large left alone. And I think some of them probably still work on the canal, but they turned it over to the Panamanians, who were.
And I mean, you can disagree with that decision or agree with that decision, think it was bad or think it was good, but it doesn't change the fact that it's theirs.
That was always my point: is that if there was a canal or if there was a ditch right where the Mississippi River is, and it was owned by the French or owned by the Panamanians, how much of that would we put up with?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's hard for us to Well, it ought not to be hard for us to imagine that the people in Panama would want to control the canal just like we would want to control
Oh,
the
sure.
Mississippi.
Yeah, no. That
I mean,
movement,
they're patriotic Panamanians too.
Panamanians were working on the engines and everything when I was there. And I was there a bunch of times, and you would see them each time you got back. They were doing more and more and more and more. And I said, well, this is just a question of time until they want their entire canal back. And they did, and they did.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself, sir, for a happy new year. And thank you for all of
you, Peter.
Yeah, all of 24. I mean, honestly.
And I hope to talk to you again really soon.
I promise, really soon. I should just have a standing appointment on Saturday with you.
There you go, man. Take care of yourself.
Dr. David Smith, thank you, sir. Take care of yourself.
Thank you.
303-696-1971. We have open lines, and our good friends, Dan Kaplis Law. I mentioned that a week ago I did Danny's show on a Tuesday. I went on the air for a couple hours with him, and it was wonderful. Dan suggests that you choose a lawyer who shares your values, and because you choose to represent, someone for you, you choose to represent you in an injury case, says volumes about you and everybody else involved in the case. Dan Kaplis, we talk about him, how he grew up, his mom, and how his dad was a cop, and he was dedicated his last 40 years of his life helping people that are hurt in serious motor vehicle accidents. And Danny's believed to be the only attorney here in Colorado to win 5 straight multi-million-dollar verdicts in Colorado crash case history. And Danny believes, and I'm listening to him do it, that Danny believes that he has won the largest truck crash case verdict in Colorado history. Dan Kaplis Law, the official law firm now of the Nuggets and the Colorado Avalanche. And Danny's my guy, my friend. It's a serious firm for very serious clients. Danny accepts righteous injury cases on percentage fee basis, so he can represent good people from all walks of life without regard of ability to pay. See the man. Call the man. 303-770-5551, 303-770-5551, or hit Dan Kaplis, Kaplis, law.com, Dan, Kaplis.com. It is a Saturday morning, everyone, December the 28th, 2024. Good old 710 KNUS 303-696-1971. We have one line open. David Smith's just the best. The history of Panama. Good morning, everyone. Saturday weather, 54 will be the high and 58 on Sunday. Go to the phones with a line open. David in San Francisco, you're on the radio show. Good morning, man, and thank you.
Oh, thanks, Peter. And yeah, I hope you're going to have a good New Year.
Thank you.
I was around when the Panama Canal was handed back.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember right, it was a 100-year contract that the United States had signed a contract with the people of Panama, in 1911 or something like that. And to give it back, it was going to be a 100-year lease. It was very similar to Hong Kong, a 100-year lease, with China. And sure enough, the Hong Kong land was given back to China. But
if you know, it's not because the British wanted to. It's because they didn't have a choice.
Well, the contract's a contract.
No, it was. But knowing what I know about British foreign policy, they'd have said screw you in a heartbeat if it was somebody other than the PRC.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I was just going to raise the issue of, Donald Trump is a slumlord. He's been a slumlord all of his life, and he uses slumlord techniques to be able to get what he wants. And so the idea of being able to pretend that the Panama Canal is American to steal again is, it's preposterous, but he's basically using the taxpayers to pay for his slumlord techniques.
Well, I'd stop you there because I don't know what the ploy is. Perhaps it's to take the attention off of something else, somewhere else. There's no way that this country is getting the Panama Canal back. But as I mentioned, right. I am becoming convinced that that Vince and his wife influenced Donald Trump in the world of professional wrestling, and I think that he uses those kinds of outrageous moments in time, and he can pull one of those out of his ear. And what I thought was interesting was the radio talk show hosts who were going, yeah, let's go get it back. And I'm going like, what do you people read? Where have you been? What have you studied? That was the part about me. But he if you think he's going to go for that canal, I'll make you a steak dinner bet.
Well, I'm glad your guest raised the issue of the drought down there. It's basically climate change, global warming, and that there's not enough water to be able to deal with these super tankers or the ships coming through there.
They don't fit. That's one of the problems. And it takes, right. I mean, there's so much water. I mean, the Panama, it takes 280,000 gallons or something to get a ship through. But it rains almost every day in Panama. It's subtropical. I've lived there off and on there's 5 different times I've been there, and Panama rains. And
it might have. I don't know that it is now, because if he mentioned a drought, then the drought is a drought.
Yeah.
And my grandmother came to San Francisco in 1904, and she talked about it raining every afternoon at 4. But it doesn't do that now. We've gone months without rain. So, the climate change is real, and to be able to take over something like the Panama Canal.
Do me a favor as we break away. What happened to all those big elephants that used to walk around Nebraska?
I never heard about it.
Well, you needn't heard about mammoth elephants that walked around Nebraska, or giant lizards?
Oh, you mean Dinosaur Park? Yeah. Dinosaur National Park. Right. Yeah. Yeah, well, it's that gets into a whole different.
No. Was Henry Ford building cars then?
No. But you
Okay.
know, if you look at, I used to live in Grand Junction.
Do this real quick because we're on time.
Sure. Well, the Grand Junction, the Grand Valley there, basically it was a massive lake, hundreds of thousands of years ago.
What happened to it?
And it suddenly drained, and it created the erosion that became the Grand Canyon.
Was Walter Chrysler building automobiles then?
Nope.
Take care of yourself. Have a good weekend. Back, everyone, after this. Good morning, everyone. It is a December the 28th, Saturday, 2024, 710 KNUS. I'm Peter Boyles, and good morning. 303-696-1971 is our phone number. We have one line open. Another beautiful day. Saturday weather says 54 the high, 58 on Sunday. Monday, it is 47 degrees. In the first hour, one of the best guests ever on the show is Professor Smith. And we were talking about Panama and the history of Panama and Donald Trump's threat to take it back. And it's transitioned into a lot of different things and open lines. I was going to bring up another topic, but this is good. It's like stuff's rolling along. Let me just read this real quick. I just checked Channel Zone AccuWeather 10-day forecast. Chance of rain every day. Yeah, I mean, I've been there 5 times. I think I've been in Panama, and believe me when I tell you, it rains. Let's start out. Let's start out with who waited longest? You're in charge. Rex? All right, hey, Rex in Greeley, Colorado. Thanks, man. Good morning. You're on the show.
Good morning, Peter.
Morning, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very fascinating last hour there, and just to consider century-old analog mosquitoes and shovels. That's all I think of when it comes to that feat.
And that's all
But I did want to offer something I saw. It's somewhat similar. The Mongolian-Siberian border, because of, I guess, previous war conflicts. So when you take a railway, either way, you stop at the border, the locomotive, all the passenger cars are lifted off, and they have to change the trucks to a narrower gauge to continue, because just out of stubbornness, I imagine, or animosity. And as daunting as that sounds, I was just more impressed with the patience and stoutness of the Russian and or Mongolian people just waiting in the railway. Who knows long, 8 to 10 hours till that happens. They just sit there patiently and deal with that till the trucks are changed and they continue the train.
Wow. Who does the work?
Wherever the juncture is at that border, I imagine it's probably the Mongolian engineers. It's kind of like, like the Panama Canal, you have to wait and lower and raise the ocean, but you have to actually change all the trucks on the darn car just to fit the new gauge. And then when it comes back, they got to reverse it, and so it can continue on to Russia or Siberia.
During the First World War, amongst the many, many, many problems that the Tsar's army had was that they had different gauges for railroads. And yes, when they were trying to move troops, they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to see a screwed up bunch of people trying to operate a railroad, Nicholas Romanoff. But no, that's not. I'm sure that's true. I mean, I wouldn't call you. I'm sure that's true.
Yeah, it was on a short YouTube documentary. I believe that can be found. Sure. I just chanced upon it to go, my God, because I have such an admiration for Russians anyway. I mean, and
I do too. I have it.
They
as
are
well.
Stout. Some things they still use vacuum tubes. I'm just saying they're so stout and patient and tough. They're tough people. I just think that, wow, they just get off the train, smoke a pack of cigarettes. 8 hours later, they get on the train again. I don't know.
Have you ever been to Russia?
No, sir.
You should. I've been 2 times, and the first time, Tom Tancredo and Ben Nighthorse Campbell were on Helsinki, and it wasn't. The commies weren't out yet, but they was coming close. And it was amazing. And then the next time I went back, it was over. And it was, that the idea of setting people free, it was hard to believe. It was hard to watch. but
Yeah,
the drinking was over the moon. And guys,
that's what we think of that vodka that they make.
And they do.
You see some shirtless, robust guy in Siberia with no shirt going, "You Americans are weak."
I went when we hired a guide, and it was a woman, and she could speak, to say better English than I can is no big deal, but that's how good she was. And I later put it together. She was working for somebody like KGB or somebody to learn, but there's a really historic place in Moscow, in Leningrad, and it's called the Finland Station. And if you want one of the most excellent books about Lenin, there's a book entitled "To the Finland Station," about when the Imperial the Imperial German Army takes Lenin and his wife and a handful of the Bolsheviks. They give them money, and they ship them from Switzerland on the train with the doors locked into this place called the Finland Station. So I said to the woman, "I want to see the train. I want to see the place." And they were kind of taken back by the fact that I would ask. And we went, and it was a park where the train station around it, and there was guys like in half sailor suits and an army hat, and they're cooked. I mean, and the women are drunk, and it's almost like this. If you ever read Downfall, the final couple of days of the Germans, and that they know they're going to die, and they just get between alcohol and whatever it is that they want to do, and then when they finally hear that Hitler shot himself, it just gets worse. And so there's
sounds like a template for a P. Diddy party.
It's exactly what it is. And so here's this little train. I mean, I was blown away by it. And they have it behind like triple thick plexiglass. And there it is. There's Lenin's train and a couple of cars connected to it. And they had to hide it during the Second World War because it would have been destroyed or bombed. And I'm with this woman. I walk down the end of this platform, and there it is, the train that Lenin rode from Switzerland to the Finland Station. And I turned around to her and I said, "The whole world changes right here."
Wow. Yeah.
And she said, "Yes." Then later she said, "How do you know all this stuff?" And I said, "I'm a reader." But no, it's there. I mean, you can see stuff from them that's, you can't get over it. I went through there's a place called the Heights where they held the Nazis, and they have these underground museums, and they're just stacks, random stacks of German armament, like German rifles and machine guns and pistols and and mashed potato grenades and everything, and they're all in these huge rooms in a dome of glass. And for some geek like me, it's like, oh, look at this, and they have the posters up, never forget this, and it's a German soldier. That's all real. I mean, they're who they are, and tough. Ooh. They won that war. And it's hard for people to believe that.
Yeah, they were resilient. Their city was under siege. And I mean, you just watch, what is it, the motion picture, Enemy at the Gates or something. And
that's a book, and the book is called the Rattenkrieg, the War of the Rats. And I would I would urge you to get the book. But
Yes,
the
yes.
book is better. The movie's wonderful. The book's better. But they're the War of the Rats, and that's what they call Stalingrad. Well, I mean, and they take such pride in it.
Oh yeah.
They turned them.
I mean,
back.
think what you want about if the guy was a son of a gun. Tough.
Oh,
God.
But
no time for nonsense here.
They held them. They held them, and Roosevelt knew it, and Churchill knew it. Take care, man. What do you do for a living? What do you do for real?
Oh, I do floor coverings. I'm
Right.
72, and I stay active. And you and I have talked in the past. I had some good times listening and speaking back to you about certain subjects. But I just wanted to share that little tidbit about how crazy that is. It's like they're still doing that after like 80 years, 90 years. They're still like lifting up trains and changing that.
Sure.
And then you wonder, how does the Panama Canal, how did they do that 100 years ago with blocks and gates and gears, like you said, and rust? I don't even know how in the heck you do that.
Yeah, I just sat there for a whole day and watched it. And it was like, whew.
Wow, yeah.
You could, the ghost of Teddy Roosevelt. Thanks. Be
well,
safe.
Thank you,
man.
sir.
Thank you. David Ellis. And saw David yesterday. You've heard me telling you to take your valuables to David Ellis Jewelers and to get a fortune in cash. And now the holidays are at least halfway done. And to get an appraisal from David for all the valuables you have tucked away in your home. And it's so true. You share that. I mean, all these other reasons to see David, just in case you don't have a Rolex watch, rare coins, and or a silver tea set. Go and see David Ellis for all of your most meaningful gift-giving occasions. David Ellis, just the right team, just the right price, special people that mean the most. The team at David Ellis, the first-rate guys, antique watches, emerald pennants, gold necklaces, diamond rings. Trusted jewelers been buying precious metals and antiques in Colorado for decades now. I've known David for decades. Dazzling cases filled with hundreds of new and used pieces for your loved ones, and they will treasure them. Visit David Ellis Jewelers and see for yourself. Look for the black awning on the corner of 3rd and Clayton and Cherry Creek. Explore davidellisjewelry.com or talk to my friend 303-322-8779. 303-322-8779. Tell him I sent you. Park, walk in, and see the man. I'm Peter Boyles. This is 710 KNUS. Boys are back Monday morning here on 710 KNUS. I'm Peter Boyles. December 28th, 2024. Happy New Year, everybody. 710 KNUS. The weather, well, looks great. 710 KNUS Weather Center weather. It's going to be 54 today and 58 tomorrow and 47 on Monday. It is open lines. We will return to the calls. Let's go to Ralph on line 3. You waited, Ralph. Thank you very much, and good morning.
Good morning. Let me get you off speaker.
Sure.
There. 3 things.
Right.
One, your person who talked about having to change the trucks on railway carriages.
Uh-huh.
The reason, or maybe one of the major reasons, I'll put it that way, that Hitler lost World War II was because the railway gauge the Russians used was not the railway gauge that the Germans used. Consequently, the more Hitler got into Russia, the harder his supply lines were, not just for guerrillas, but for the simple matter that you can put a heck of a lot more on a train than you can on a truck. And it doesn't require gasoline, or at least as much gasoline, to carry a much heavier load.
With respect, I've read that it was the First World War going the other way, and
It also happened that one.
Okay, fair enough.
That's why these, how shall I say, somebody in the Russian bureaucracy under the Tsar put in a different gauge.
Okay.
So that even when the Russians, one of the reasons the Germans thought they had to attack Russia to start the start of World War I was because the Russians had put double track Russian gauge railways to their border, or were trying to. But they hadn't gotten through Poland yet.
I don't know if you've ever read Solzhenitsyn, but
yes,
it'll make you cry. And that was Solzhenitsyn. Yes. That's what Solzhenitsyn wrote about, was they would issue ammunition for rifles that wouldn't work. The calibers were different. They would issue bayonets that would not fit on the barrels of the weapons. They would issue, and they would get on trains that didn't fit. In other words, the rail cars would not transfer over. And remember, and all Solzhenitsyn ends up imprisoned just for critiquing the Stalinist artillery. So think about how they lived a life, and there they all are. And
the Russians were and are incredibly tough.
Oh,
but I mean the thing is, on the quick second point.
Sure.
That is, this is unfortunately an Army analysis, not an Air Force analysis. Mm-hmm. But they've had logicians and supply officers longer than the Air Force was in existence. Mm-hmm. There's a saying, and that is that amateurs talk battles, professionals discuss logistics. Mm-hmm. And there's a book coming out. I don't know if you have read him. I hope you have. Rick Atkinson. He's a 1960.
I met him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh. If you ever see him again, tell him I said hello, and I'm in awe of him.
Okay.
He also graduated. He graduated West Point in 67. I graduated the academy. Anyway, Atkinson has a new book coming out on the American Revolution.
Oh, man.
And I'm kind of interested in it. But the thing is, what I am so amazed at and so glad he's writing is that his analysis in the first of the trilogy of the American Revolution includes logistics and what the British were up against logistically in trying to supply or increase their army here in New England. It was almost impossible given how long it took and how little you could put on a ship and how dangerous some of those passages in the North Atlantic were.
One of my favorite movies here, we're talking about stuff. Did you ever see the movie about the German submariners?
Yes.
And, you know, not the U-571, but the one where they're
Dust Boot.
Dust Boat. And you got to and see it in German. Don't see it in English.
Wish I spoke German. I don't.
Right. Well, no, I don't either. But there's just something, they put subtitles, and there's something about that, and you find yourself, or at least I found myself, pulling for the German submariners.
Yep.
And I know I'm not alone. And when they finally get back, and you think they've made it up until they come in those pins. And but what a movie! I mean, and then I saw a documentary on how they made the movie. Oh my heavens! It was like the work that they did to invent or reinvent the submarine itself, and you know the drinking.
You mean the one they used?
Yeah, and they had a couple of them, and but everybody has that moment that if you read, there was a book called The Private, I think, I read thousands of years ago, and it was about a German Wehrmacht draftee kid, 17, 18 years old. And the real enemy was the cold.
Yeah.
It wasn't the British. It wasn't the Americans. He's scared to death. And he has the cold, that he has to deal with the cold. And you can take him, I guess, either way. You can say, good for you, that you have that coming. Or you can see some 17-year-old kid who's never been away from home before, and he knows it's a lie, and they're fighting. They're really fighting the cold. They're not fighting the Allies.
Well, Peter, I think that goes into your analysis of Donald Trump and professional wrestling.
Oh yeah, I believe it has a lot to do with it.
Well, the perspective. I'll speak for myself. The perspective is we are all human beings, and we all relate to each other until some damn ideology gets in the way.
Oh, sure.
And then we are taught that we should hate the other person and kill the other person. Go ahead.
But with wrestling, up until the moment when they broke kayfabe, and admitted that there was a work, they have stories that you wouldn't believe about how the marks would come up and try and kill them, and they hated them that bad. There was manufactured heat, and they took great pride in that. That they could.
It's performance art.
Absolutely. That they could.
And I mean, excuse me, but that's American politics as far as I'm concerned.
I agree. I agree again.
Let me get one real. Oh, go ahead.
You take one more.
Final point. We're talking Panama, and fundamentally, the more I read, the more I'm coming to a viewpoint that Mother Nature influences us and whatever we do in our puny human ways far more than we ever admit or are willing to admit. And when you talk about the Panama Canal, you talk about it could not be built until yellow fever was conquered. Right.
Well, it could be, but they were losing them as they went.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if 90% of your workforce dies, it's hard to get more people to come.
Actually, not. that was the part of.
Well, that's true. That's true with Panama, but I'm thinking on something else. But the thing is, also remember what happened, and we're sort of when I mentioned ideology. We seem to be going back to the United States is the grandest nation in the world. Therefore, we can take Panama back if we don't like what you did. Yeah. And that is precisely what Smedley Butler was doing.
We're going to do a book on it. There's a book now on Smedley Butler. We got it scheduled. We're going to do it.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. But anyway, that's the reason when you look at how the English or the French conquered, they used very few troops in the tropics, because the tropics or Africa or wherever were so deadly in disease. That's why you ended up with the sepoys.
Sure.
British officers, Indian, 100 to 1 or maybe 95 out of 100 are sepoys. The others are the British who can survive for a few years maybe in malaria or elsewhere.
The British had available a drug called quinine.
But that was not until I think 18-something.
No, got addicted to it, but they would.
It's gin.
No, that's exactly what it is, and they're drinking quinine, and it somehow kept. Who knows? But Rudyard Kipling, when they talk about the white man's burden, and they talk about quinine. Thanks a lot. Good call. Thank you. 303-696-1971. Ski resorts, and I hope a week from this Sunday, I get a day with Gary D. But the ski resorts are experiencing better snow right now. It's got tonnage up there. And it's a perfect time to consider taking your skis, snowboards, to get in for a tune-up, maybe even getting new gear for Christmas. If you didn't get it for Christmas, go over and get it now. There'll be deals. There's always deals. For the best winter sports equipment, head over to Larson Ski and Sport. John Marriott, Jack Marriott, Paul. I mean, they're located south of I-70 on Kipling. So whether you're looking to rent or buy, and with kids, rent. Always with kids, rent. You're going to be bigger next year. Larson's has got you covered. They're dedicated to providing you with the best skiing experience possible. They know what they're doing. And the convenience of Larson's is unbeatable. It's a perfect stop on your way up or down the mountain. Something happens, you're coming down a hill, you did something, you're binding, get off on the Kipling exit, just stay south, make a right. You see them when you come down the ramp. Big wooden box right on the right-hand side, Larson Ski and Sport. Same thing, you're going up the hill, get off on the Kipling exit, come down the ramp, make a left and go underneath I-70. There's a tunnel, go underneath, come out the other side, look to your right, see it, there it is. It's the warehouse, 7 days a week. It's on the right-hand side. You can't miss it. See the man. John Marriott and these guys are the state of the art. They're absolute experts at everything you need for water sports, for winter sports. Learn to read. I mean, really, it's one of the most important things you can learn to do is read. Stop in today and tell them I sent you. Larson Ski and Sport, south of I-70 on Kipling, 303-423-0654, 303-463-0654, on the web, Larson Sport, Larson Sport.com. Morning, everybody. It is a Saturday, 7:10 KNUS, the 28th of December, 2024, 7:10 KNUS. The weather beauty. I'm looking out the window, too. 54 the high, 58 tomorrow, and 47 on Monday. Lines are full. Let's just go back to the phones. We go to, is it Patrick on line one? Hey, Patrick, thank you for waiting. You're on the radio show. Good morning. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to tell you, I was in Panama just before the invasion. I was in the Army. I was a photographer, and we had to go on a helicopter and take photos of all the landing sites.
What did you think? How long were you there?
Oh, I was there for a month, and I was there. I got jumped when I was down there because I had one of those film cameras, the Nikon with the motor drive and and I used that as a weapon. And about 15 guys were on me, surrounding me, and then a bus stops. Guys come out and they beat up those guys.
Which one of the forts were you at?
I was trying to think where I was. I was at Camp Howard.
Okay.
And I slept on top of the NCO club.
All right.
And when you go to take a shower, there's girls in there already.
Mm-hmm.
It's an open base because it's owned by the Indians.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
Because generally down there, you can just take a shower on a roof when it rains.
Yeah, but have you seen a shower where you got girls already in there naked?
That makes it a good thing.
Oh, you darn right.
Wait, that wasn't a complaint, was it?
No, as a matter of fact, the Puerto Rican guard, they got kicked out of Panama because the girls were having a floor show, and one girl jumped into the guy's bed and he threw her out the window.
Ah.
So they got rid of them, and then we had to go back and finish their tour.
You should have busted him down for that.
Yeah. I don't know what they did. It was the Puerto Rican National Guard, because the way they saved money over there was every 2 weeks a different state would take Camp Howard.
Oh man!
So they didn't have
So were you there when the invasion came?
I was there. They called me up, and I went there, and just shooting photos and stuff like that. Yeah. And then, oh, by the way, did you go to the? There's a French fort there.
I think I did. I think I did.
Yeah, it was built of granite, and the French actually shipped the granite from France. And when you go in the city, if you've been to France, you'll say, "My God, this is France," because even the courtyards, the buildings, they didn't finish the canal, but they finished the city.
No, I believe I know where you're talking about.
Yeah.
I was in Panama City and Cologne or Colon, at the other end of the canal, at the other end of the.
On the Pacific side, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I know we were. Yeah, you were, David. I know we were. Yeah. Did you see the Indian women?
Oh,
walking around topless.
I believe I did see that.
Yeah, it was. But that's interesting. But they let them live their own way. They don't bother them.
See, that's the thing about people that get uptight. And if you go into the third world, and it sounds like you have, don't expect it.
Yeah.
It's the third world, and
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing darker than nighttime in the third world. There's no lights. That's dark.
Let me ask you something. Do you know what May Day means?
Yeah.
Well, what does it mean?
It's the end of the call. It's the Mayday, Mayday.
Okay.
What is
where
it
came from?
No,
what is it really?
No, I don't.
Okay, why is it August Day or June? May Day, it's French. Midi, to help me. Midi.
Oh, okay.
And so you say May Day. Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's great.
It's like Jolly Roger.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Jolly Roger is Joli Rouge, beautiful red, because the pirate flag was red.
Whoa.
And of course, the English, they could pronounce Joli Rouge, so they said Jolly Roger.
I love collecting stuff like that. Have you ever?
Yeah, me too.
No,
Oh,
have
yeah.
you ever heard mind your P's and Q's?
Oh, mind your P's and Q's. Oh, yes, yeah. I learned that in Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Do you know where that comes from?
No.
It's Irish. Mind your pints and quarts.
Oh,
You've
nice.
gotten out of line in a bar or a pub.
Yeah. Well, right up the house, right?
Well, right up the house, sure. I still say it, and my kids look at me like I'm speaking Chinese. but the bartender or he would say, "Now mind your P's and Q's. Mind your pints and quarts." One more that I recently learned: the cigars that are called the stogies.
Oh yeah. What is that?
From the Conestoga wagons, the guys who were the wagon masters, the original Teamsters, they all smoked those little cigars. And those little cigars they were called Conestogas because of what they did. And they just cut it down to stogies. And that was the cigar that they ran. But mind your P's and Q's it jumped off a page. It was mind your pints and quarts.
Yeah, I had when I came to Pittsburgh, I was 8 years old, and I had to learn English.
Oh yeah,
and
sure.
They said, you learn English, or we're going to have 200 million people learn French. Now, which is it going to be?
I'll do it. We'll do this one real quick. How you doing?
Oh, how's doing? You're doing? Yes, that's typical Pittsburgh. Yes.
How you doing?
Yep.
How much money you make last year?
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Nobody pulls a punch.
But I thought that was normal English until
went
around the country.
What do I know? You take care of yourself. Good call, brother, man. Be good. Thanks. How much time we got here? We have time. I can take his call. Please say to Doug. And why are we going to Doug next? Hey, Doug, you're on a radio show. It's a Saturday. Thank you and good morning.
Good to talk to you again, Peter.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks again for all your work you do. You do an astounding program. That's all I can describe.
You're kind.
So, anyway, I'm in a remote area, so I'll pull over here and stop. But I was in Panama in sometime in the mid '80s, and it was just a tourism thing. Looked at that a little bit, but then I went back through on a cruise about 3 or 4 years ago, and I just have a couple of points to add to information today. I went on a tour with a native-born Panamanian, and he appeared to be very well educated. And he, in the course of the conversation, it was a small group, I asked him about the agreement with the United States, and he said that in the agreement negotiated by President Carter, that there's a clause that says if any country takes control of the Panama Canal other than Panama, that the canal automatically reverts back to the United States. I don't know if you'd ever heard that before.
No, I read the.
Then on the issue of the water, it appears that they've done the same thing there that we've done in rivers in this part of the country, where they've over appropriated the flow of that river. And he said that has come about because they had to build a second set of locks, and you can see those from the cruise ship. But in that, they built that second set of locks to accommodate cargo ships because the original locks were too small. In order to facilitate larger ships and more traffic, they've over appropriated the amount of waters coming into the lake.
Because
that's one of the problems they're having now with what some people are calling climate change.
A lot of the big ships cannot fit through. And there's talk of another canal. But the big aircraft carriers and some of the tankers, or some of the cargo ships really can't get through. And some of them can, but it's just a question of time. But your point's really well taken.
He also said on the issue of the second canal that supposedly, I think he said it's supposed to be in Nicaragua.
Yep.
And it's being built by Chinese interests.
No, I've not heard that, but Nicaragua was, well, they invent Nicaragua. The hand of Uncle Sam, but they issue these stamps, and I'm trying to remember exactly how that went down, with volcanoes on them, scaring investors off because they wanted to grab Panama.
What he said that that potential one that's being built in Nicaragua is a sea level canal, no locks.
Huh? Could be. You know, one of the things about the Chinese in terms of their foreign policy, they don't do what the British, the French, the Soviets, the Russians, the Americans do. They rarely send guys with guns.
Yeah.
And then after they build what they build, they leave.
Yeah.
And they're looked upon fondly. I mean, it's smart. They build railroads. They build things that people can use, and then they leave.
Well, when I heard the president-elect talking about taking back Nicaragua, the canal, I just thought, well,
here we go.
It isn't so much what you say as how you say it.
Yeah.
And if there's a provision where we can take it back if it's under foreign control, that's one thing. But taking it back,
even then. But I still think it's a Vince McMahon move, and just get everybody riled up. But I don't know if he has any intent to do stuff. If you watch him, he makes these statements about what he is about to do or what he's going to do, and then it doesn't happen. And I think it's a lot of pro wrestling. I really do.
Yeah.
And he pulls it away. Very, 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 very good call, Mike. I really these are great calls, brother, man. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, it's always good to talk to you, Peter.
You too, sir. All right. Our friends at Water Pros cares about the quality of your water. You can remove forever chemicals, microplastics, hard water. You could do it with Water Pros. You get a whole lot of soft water, drinking water, point of use, reverse osmosis drinking water. I have no idea what that means. Just here, read it. Reverse osmosis drinking water system. Now I get fully installed and I get the price. So start the process. Go to waterpros.net and team up with your free in-home consultation. They will come to your home. They'll test your water. They'll answer all of your questions and all your concerns you may have. We got the system in the house, and these guys, they're beauty. They really, 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 if you're a customer, they're going to be there to take care of you. Water Pros is family operated and veteran-owned business dedicated to providing you with the best in water systems, water treatments for far less than the other guys. Go to waterpros.net today and request your free. Just take the water test. Get the water test done. 303-862-5554. 303-862-5554. 303-862-5554. 303-862-5554. The Peter Boyles Special, Water Pros, and we're right back. And good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Get it right, Peter. It is a Saturday. There it is. No, and again, Saturday afternoon. Wait a minute. Let me look at the time. Oh, it's still morning. Still morning. Take it all back. 11:01 a.m., 710 KNUS Denver Stock Station. Thank you for being here. Our weather, Saturday weather, it's going to be partly cloudy and 54, 58 on Sunday, Monday, 47 degrees. We started the morning off at 9 o'clock with Professor Smith from Baylor University on Panama and talking about when Donald Trump said, "I'll just take it." And it brought down tons of calls on all kinds of different things. I was going to talk about artificial intelligence because I don't know anything about that either. But no, this is just taking its, as I always say, talk radio, no man its master. It has a mind of its own. So we have jammed up lines. Where do we start? Mike in Littleton on line 3. Okay. Mike in Littleton, you're on the radio show. Thank you. And not quite good afternoon, but good morning.
Close enough. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, I heard your interview earlier with Professor Smith, and you said you asked him if the canal, if you will, or if that Panamanian situation was stolen by us. And, he kind of poo-pooed that a little bit, but, I had to pull off Path Between the Seas off my bookshelf here and kind of leaf through it. McCullough maintains that we had ships on both sides of the canal, not the canal, of the isthmus, the Caribbean side and the Pacific, and that Colombia could have easily invaded and landed with about 1,000 people and put that revolt down that occurred. And but our ships blocked that.
That's right.
They did try to. Yeah, they tried to go across the Darien Gap to try to put down the rebellion. And that didn't work either. Most of their people got sick. So, I wouldn't say we stole it. We engineered it.
Well, that's how it works. I mean, that's why. I mean, and I love Professor Smith, but I said, did we collectively, did we steal that country? And there are dozens of historians that believe we stole Panama.
Yeah. Well, and in that same book, there were people that testified in Congress.
That's right.
The late 1900s, saying that our actions with that Panamanian Revolution, if you want to call it that, generated tremendous amounts of animosity throughout Central and South America towards America and American imperialism.
Read about there's an organization called United Fruit, and really United Fruit really comes about it's another technology, because now they have the cooler ships, they have the refrigeration ships that they can move bananas and they can do, bring up tropical fruit. Well, they needed growers, and they took not all, but it took a large percentage of Southern planters, pre-Civil War planters, and they took them to into Central America, and they would make the native people step off the sidewalk and remove their hats when the white planters and their wives walked by.
Well, that's what they did with the South and the black people.
Precisely, exactly. It was and so then there were people in power in places that could grow. The Guatemala was one of them, of course. Honduras was one of them, and they were all places that were left in turmoil. And but that system, they implemented a feudal system after the American Civil War into the central part of Central America, and they ran it that way. And yet American people were happy. They were getting bananas and they were getting fruit for the first time without realizing exactly the same thing.
Well, to your point, it's always good to read this history when people start throwing this stuff out. And trying to get a bit of the background, and because we've generated a good share of animosity around the world with some of the stuff we've done and continue to do.
And we just went through, we did on Friday, that new book on Friday about the places. No, it was a week ago Saturday. The places in the world where the United States of America told lies and people died, and it's unforgivable. And the Johnsons and Nixons and Cheneys and Bushes, and they did these things. There has to come a time, and I can only hope it's Trump, that insanity will stop and we come home. But
we need to talk to him though, because why stir up Panama? I haven't heard anybody talk about Panama since Carter.
No,
seems like.
But they're making this up about the Chinese. But it's a pro wrestling move, and it's a good one. It's a work.
Yeah, well, we don't want to make that work turn into a war with China, which seems like some folks are trying to work on.
Yeah, they're the principal parts of talk radio today are making big headway on the PRC, and it's when you read those guys, and they'll tell you the most single significant thing that Z has to do is feed people. He doesn't have to pick fights. He needs to feed people. And how do you do that? They have to work. And how do they do that? The multinational corporations and the banking interest. They do not need to be in a war, and he knows it.
Well, Gordon Chang was on a recent talk show, and he said the talk of Washington is a war with China in 2027. All over Washington, everybody's talking about that. And he maintains because the economy is cratering in China, and they're going to need to have a war. And I think it's the opposite direction. I think we're the ones ginning it up.
I do as well. Thank you.
Anyways, you bet.
We go to Jack in Wyoming. Is that where we go next? Hey, Jack, there's a line
Pete,
open. Yeah, you're on a radio show.
I'm up here with an old friend of yours, Chiquita Banana, by the way.
I'm Chiquita Banana, and I come to
starvation is always the thing that ends communism. It's never ended with bullets. It's always ended with starvation, and then they have an uprising. That's as you know. Okay, let me get to this one I think you already know, and I don't know if it's true or not. But you were talking about common sayings that we have all the time, and what was the origin of those? And the one where we always say things are okay, and I'm sure you know this one. Okay, that's old Kinderhook. That's the 8th president of the United States. That's Martin Van Buren.
It was a stamp, yeah.
Well, okay, but they said I've read that too. I've read that it's not true. But he signed his papers okay. That's the way he signed them. In 1840, when he became president, he stopped writing. He used, like I said, he was called Old Kinderhook, and he would sign all the presidential papers okay. And they say that's where okay comes from.
I love how there's one called Making Your Nut. And you've heard that. We've heard it. I got to make my nut, or he made his nut. And it comes from when there were, I'll use the word carnivals, but they were more like, gypsies and everybody else involved, and they traveled in these carts, and they had and there was a guy who was called the sheriff that later becomes the sheriff, and he would go out, and they would remove the lug nuts on the wagons, and until the troop could square up with everybody in the town that they didn't owe anybody any money, they hadn't ripped anybody off, then they made their nut. And the sheriff would bring back the nuts, put them on the axles.
They couldn't go anywhere.
And then they could leave. And they had made their nuts, or made their nut. And I love stuff like that. I mean, everything that we say like that, it's a derivation of something that is gut level someplace else.
Yeah. Yeah, or it's been bastardized to mean something completely different. Have you noticed, I know you're my age, but the biggest thing that that I'm noticing lately is that I'm having such a problem with time management. I can't manage time. It was like 2 months ago I was 30, and now I'm 82.
Oh, I know.
And how does that happen? How does that happen?
You know, when you get that blast is when you get that blast about around the holidays.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there with my grandson, and I'm thinking about when I was his age, what I was expecting or what I was doing. And he and I are, we're walking up a trail in Winter Park, Christmas Eve, to get up above a they call it the ski down. It's great. The great skiers of Winter Park, and there's a lot of them, the ski instructors and the senior skiers and those guys, and they start way up in the tree line and they light torches and they ski serpentine down. And then when they're done, Santa Claus comes down in a sled. I don't know how they do it. And then and then followed by the groomers, and the groomers cover their lights purple and yellow and everything. And I said, I never even dreamt that stuff like this happened. And here's this little kid, and he's like, hey, this is my third ski down, I'm going.
You know what the best one of that is? When you and I were 12 years old and we had to read Orwell. And I looked at the kid sitting next to me, 1984. I said, we'll never live long enough to see 1984.
Yeah.
We thought that was so far out in the future that was like, forget it.
Yeah.
And look how far that is in the rearview mirror now.
Take care. Thanks, man.
Okay.
Are we going to Jeff and Golden? Is that where we're going? Or I'll do Terry. All right, we got Terry. Hey, Terry, you're on a radio show. Happy Saturday. Good morning and afternoon.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Pleasure.
And I know you have a lot of other callers, so I'll be brief. But I heard your show last Saturday, and this is an add-on to the story about Castro.
Okay.
In the early 70s, I was living in a place called McLean, Virginia, which is where the headquarters of the CIA. Yeah.
Sure.
Langley. And I was dating a very nice man. He was 31, and he had been working for the CIA since he graduated from college. And when he joined, they kind of asked him, which country would you like to be an analyst for? And so he picked Cuba. And one night, just a very brief story, but it ties into last Saturday. One night we were out to dinner, and he told me that our country viewed Castro as a very dangerous man. And there had been some attempts to get rid of him, to assassinate him. And then he told me recently, he said there was one where a beautiful woman was hired, in a sense, to have an interlude with him and to poison him. And he said, but it didn't work. I don't know how it failed. I'm not.
Were they trying to poison him?
A beautiful woman was hired.
Oh, yeah, sure. Castro's lover.
To be with him. I don't know who that was, but he just said that it failed.
They tried, that's all they tried.
Yeah, they tried different ways. And I didn't hear that particular. Did you know that?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not hear that part.
Well, it was called Operation Mongoose. And they're after the Bay of Pigs. And then I'm reading on how the world works. I got a book sent to me. I picked it up here Friday, The Kennedy Conspiracy. And it's very good. And I put 2 books aside. I'm reading this. So they go, and the CIA knows that organized crime wants to come back into Havana. There are these legendary hotels that are owned by organized crime, and they're very profitable gambling operations. And the American and Jack Kennedy, who doesn't realize that the organized crime people are after him, but his brother Bobby knows, and his father Joe knows, and the American CIA knows, organized crime knows, and they start, and a guy by the name of Robert Mayhew, who I actually met. Robert Mayhew meets Sam Giancana, Tony Arcardo, and Santos Trafficante, and they decide they're going to plot. And one of the ideas, and they're getting in bed with the CIA, and it's called Mongoose, and they have. And there's another group called Alpha 66. So I'm trying to make my mind remember. And Alpha 66 was more of a CIA, but they ran something called the Black Gangs. And they were, the reason they were called Black Gangs is they were not on budgets. You couldn't read about them on a budget. And they went into prisons and they recruited in jails to join, they were called the Black Gangs. And so they make a couple of attempts, and Castro, number one, is incredibly lucky, and number two, they're incredibly bad. And so they do get his girlfriend, and she's apparently a very, very beautiful woman, and she attempts to poison him, and it fails.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that last week, Peter. I apologize.
No. But
I didn't hear that you already knew that last week. I didn't know
that stuff is like if you're a weirdo like me. But then my best, when the Ramsey case was going on, Vanity Fair had this wonderful woman writer, and her name was Anne. You can look her up, Anne Louise Bardak. And Anne Louise had allegedly, and I didn't ask her, had been like Hemingway's lover and had been Castro's lover. You know, she was one of these she was, I don't think she was as old as I am now, but she was something else. She's legendary.
Oh.
And so Anne Louise, Vanity Fair sent Anne Louise out to cover the Ramseys. And I get a phone call, and she said, she's a cigarette in her mouth, and says, "You're the guy I'm supposed to find." And I ended up going to the Boulderado with her, and she got a room, and then but she had the stories. God, she told me stories, and she knew about all of that stuff too. They really tried. They really, 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 really tried.
Yes.
And then the time came that they turned on organized crime, and Jack Kennedy didn't want any of that to catch up with him. His love affair with Marilyn Monroe, his relationship with Sam Giancana, his relationship with a woman named Judy Exeter Campbell. His brother Bob had become the lover of Marilyn Monroe. I mean, it was so interplayed that I believe they murdered Marilyn Monroe to keep her mouth shut. And they were going around, they were killing people. And they shot Sam Giancana. They took Johnny Rosselli, and they put him in a 55-gallon oil drum. They cut him up with a saw, and because he was going to testify. And so it was all going to end in. And then what's really fascinating, if you look at it from the long run, all this attention given to the Kennedy assassination until what?
Yes.
Till Lyndon Johnson. And Lyndon Johnson shuts it all down, creates this phony document called the Warren Commission.
Correct.
And then it just goes away.
And you are aware, since you are, you have an astute mind and you have a lot of facts that you've retained all of these years, that Evelyn Lincoln, when asked if she had any idea who did she suspect as a prime individual behind the assassination, that she did say Lyndon Johnson.
Oh, I know she did.
You're aware of that?
Okay. Evelyn Lincoln was Jack Kennedy's personal secretary.
I know. Yeah, I know.
And she said, I don't believe that. he was, they called him Uncle Cornpone behind his back.
Right.
And they pushed him out. Bobby Kennedy pushed him out. Bobby Kennedy hated him. He really hated Bobby Kennedy. But there was nothing. I mean, Lyndon Johnson was capable of a lot, but there was nothing in.
Okay.
But it was organized crime, and it was the American CIA. And they decided that Jack Kennedy had to go, and that's what they did.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the report finally coming out under Donald Trump. He said he would do it.
Said he'd do it.
And I hope he does.
You and I both.
Yes.
That would be something.
Yes.
Have a great
Thank
week.
you for my time, Peter.
Thank you for your time. Thank you, ma'am.
And Happy New Year to you, honey.
You too. Thanks, darling.
Bye-bye.
Bye. 303-696-1971. Where are we? John and Lives. Get lost in this. I think I'm down to 1 or 2. John knows. What do we got? I'll do Larson. We have Larson and Kaplis. That sounds like a law firm, doesn't it? Larson and Kaplis. The ski reports right now up in the Front Range are just amazing. It is just tons and tons and tons of snow. And hopefully a week from tomorrow, that's where I'll be. And the ski resorts are experiencing better snow conditions, making it a perfect time to consider taking your skis and your snowboard for a tune-up, maybe even getting new gear. If you didn't get it for Christmas, take it, do yourself the prize, right? So for the best winter snow equipment, head over to Larson's, Larson, Larson Ski and Sport, located south of I-70 on Kipling. So whether you're looking to rent or buy equipment, Larson's got you covered. They're dedicated to providing you with the best skiing experience possible. Convenience of Larson's is unbeatable. It's a perfect stop on your way up or down the mountain. You find them in large wooden buildings that they have right off of I-70 and Kipling. So you're going westbound on I-70. Comes the Kipling exit, it's on the right side. Go down the exit and then make a left and go underneath the tunnel, come out the other side, drive about 100 yards, and right on your right-hand side, you'll see 7 days a week, Larson Ski and Sport. Same thing coming home. Just drive down the ramp, stay to your right. There it is, Larson Ski and Sport. You can't miss it. So 7 days a week with the best tuners, the best people, the people that know equipment better than anyone. Trust me, John has put this together, John Marriott, and the guys at Larson Ski and Sport, absolutely, and they're the experts at everything you need for winter sports. So no, and again, stop in today. Nobody's going to beat your prices. And tell them I sent you. Larson Ski and Sport, south of I-70 on Kipling, 303-423-0654, 303-423-0654, 303-423-0654, Larson Sport. Amazing. Morning, everybody. Afternoon, good morning, good evening. December the 28th, 2024. Really beautiful day. 54 the high, 58 tomorrow. Let us go to Mark in Aurora. Mark, good morning. We have full lines. You're on a radio show.
Pete, how's it going?
Good, man.
You know, there's a quote that is cited on the internet by Roger Stone. He asked Nixon, who killed John F. Kennedy? And Nixon shuddered and said, let me put it this way. Lyndon and I both wanted to be president. The difference was I wasn't willing to kill for it.
Yeah.
And on the same site, which is Charlie Kirk's X site, he quotes the 1992 Congressional Act passed to release 100% of the JFK and sign into law records. And of course, you know, Trump said he would do it and did not.
No.
He says he'll do it this time. And I saw an interview, I think you and I may have talked about it, that the judge that he got sideways with, of course, Trump always gets sideways with even his friends. But he basically told him when he asked him, why didn't you release those documents? This is the last 10 days he was in office. He goes, do you know what's in those files?
Yeah.
And I know what's in those files. The government killed the president. That's what's in the files.
What I think, and again, the variables, first of all, it's great call. The variables in that model are so they're just stacked, and
yeah,
you can't eliminate one without you have to bring them all into view. And
well, I believe that you're right, and I believe the mob was in it, Pete, no doubt, and they wanted him dead, no doubt. But I also think the government used them as the front. Because let's face it, back in that era, and I was 5 when he was killed, I was in Dallas. I went to Dealey grade school. So, you know, Dealey Plaza, the newspaper publisher. So anyway, and I have the book from the original. I worked for Curry, the police chief's wife. So I got an original issue of his book, which is, you know, fascinating. A lot of stuff in there that people don't get, that, you know, that Oswald flunked the paraffin test for shooting a rifle.
Oh, no.
He didn't shoot a rifle.
No.
And there's a picture of him standing in the doorway when the shots are being fired. Yeah. So once you start with that, you got to find somebody else. That's what I always tell people. And I think the marksmen there were the best in the world. And it was like shooting ducks in a barrel.
Yeah. I mean, if you can, not that we'll be able to do it, but there's the bookends of that time period, because I don't believe the 60s really begin until Jack Kennedy's murdered. 61, 62, they're still the 60s. No one has gone bad yet on Vietnam. Dr. King is starting his run, his struggle.
Yeah, I Have a Dream. I Have a Dream was that same.
And
same year.
Yeah, we had not, the music was still Happy Together and the Cowsills and, you know, it hadn't turned into Jimi Hendrix and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and none of these things had happened yet. And Jack Kennedy, who as a young guy at the time, a lot of guys put their trust and their faith in the future with Jack Kennedy. He's an Irish Catholic, you know, and he's an immigrant, and all the kinds of things that everybody I grew up with were. And he was that guy. And then,
well, he was a player, you know, he was a player. But here's the thing, though. I believe, and remember, growing up in Texas, they didn't particularly like Kennedy
at all.
But then there were a lot of Catholics in Dallas. But I believe, even though he was a flawed male, shall we say, he I think he was a good American. Now, his brother was not. And the irony is his brother's hatred for his dad's partners, the mob, got his other brother killed.
Well, Bobby Kennedy, first of all, there's a word that rhymes with, I'm trying to think, it begins with P.
Yeah.
It has a K on the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Bobby Kennedy.
2 other letters in the middle.
Yes, there are. And I mean, Bobby Kennedy is a bad person.
He was. He was bad. My dad, when I was younger, said, that one right there, he's dangerous.
He's very, and they knew it, and they were afraid of him. Although they were afraid of Hoover, but everybody else was afraid of Bobby Kennedy. He was horrible tempered. The only reason he was on the job was because of his brother, and he, on some level, knew that. He was Marilyn Monroe's lover. I think he was directly involved in her death. So he's totally capable. Bobby Kennedy is totally capable. But when he goes after Jimmy Hoffa, when he deports Carlos Marcello, when he puts Marcello in Nicaragua or Guatemala, he's doing these things, the Hoffa Wars. And and finally,
people now don't understand how powerful, the millennials have no idea how powerful a Jimmy Hoffa was.
Jimmy,
they have no idea. A lot of people say a place that I operated for 6 years, Port Huron, they say that's where he got whacked, which is 26 miles north of Detroit.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
No, that the movie, the Irishman, that movie was terrible. That wasn't. But somewhere along the line, Jimmy went. He had to go. But you got all these different. I can't tell you how much I like this call. You have all these different players, Mark, that you got to account for. And Lyndon Johnson, according to the pilot of Air Force One, it was a colonel. He slapped Lyndon Johnson on the airplane. There were witnesses that Lyndon Johnson was saying, they're going to kill us all. They're going to kill us all. And he was he was over the edge. And they weren't supposed to take the body out of Texas because they're removing a body from the crime scene. And the Secret Service guys are pulling their guns in the hospital. And they took his body back out to the airport and put it on the airplane. Lyndon Johnson's melting down, and this colonel comes back and just slaps him and says, "Get a hold of yourself." And but the world changes after that, and that's the part that troubles me. It
does, but you know what, Pete? It's so much more dangerous now because, and I try to tell my brother who leans a whole lot more than me towards all these conspiracy things out there. Listen, if there's a conspiracy, you better put China in there. You better put Russia in there.
No.
George Soros is he's a money launderer.
No, but the guys, what happened, this is all self-inflicted. The Gulf of Tonkin self-inflicted. Jack Kennedy's death is self-inflicted. Iran, the idea that there's WMDs in Iraq, that's self-inflicted. We can sit outside and we can blame the PRC, or we can blame the old Soviets, or now now Putin, but it isn't true. This is why there's so much truth to Trump's talking, if you would, of a shadow government. And
I wish you would have Tancredo on next week when you're on.
I just talked to him, sure,
to talk about. He was given the job, he told me, by Reagan to tear down and deconstruct the
education.
What was it? Department of Education.
Yeah.
Trump can do his greatest work by deconstructing so much of that mess up there, Pete.
Because
the permanent bureaucracy is a joke.
Yeah. Well, if Donald Trump, and I say if, but he's got this opportunity, if he doesn't decide to become individually vindictive against people, but rather is the true disruptor. And he brings in Musk, and he brings in, I mean, these guys they're lunatics, but they know the truth.
Hey, take the Department of Interior and put it in Cody, Wyoming, up where all the, I mean, do that stuff, and deconstruct this permanent bureaucracy and get it off people's backs. I mean,
watch.
We had one of the most onerous tax systems in the world in the late 70s until Reagan got in.
If he can appoint Musk and cut Musk loose, hide and watch.
I agree. And Pete, I think it'll be a subject for another day, but I think when it's all said and done, the dirtiest government, and I have friends that actually sell arms. So this guy now will go down as and I'm talking about the justice system. He's the dirtiest. He beats Nixon by a country mile, the way he abused the government. I believe that power, without question.
Great call. Thank you so much. All right. We do the other side, right? Okay. One more hour. Now I say good afternoon. 710 KNUS. I'm Peter Boyles. You stay right here. Good afternoon. There, we'll do it right. Coming up, we'll say good afternoon in a few moments on a Saturday, December the 28th, 2024. 710 KNUS Denver's Talk Station. I'm Peter Boyles. Good to have everybody here. Our phone number, but our lines are jammed, are 303-696-1971. When somebody drops off, you come on. We began this morning talking about Panama and the history of Panama with Dr. Smith from Baylor. And we've kind of rolled into all kinds of open lines. And so lines are jammed and lines are ready to go. So let's just start. Line 3 is Jeff in Golden, Colorado. I believe he waited longest. Hey, Jeffrey, thank you for waiting. You're on the show. Good afternoon. Not quite good afternoon, but good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good, man.
Good to hear you on the radio. I wish you was at 5 o'clock in the morning, but
oh, dark 30.
Nobody's on it. It's the toughest. I wish somebody'd go on it.
Well, the old man got up early, for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And so no, it's you know what? I can't tell you I don't miss it because I do, but
sure.
You miss it for a couple of days. When I quote retired,
right,
I was sitting on the edge of the bed at 3 o'clock in the morning for about a month and a half, going, because your body just gets up.
Yeah.
And there's a great story about fire horses in New York, and LaGuardia becomes the mayor of New York. And so Ford LaFrance, I think, was the company that was starting to make motorized fire trucks. So they sat down and they said, okay, let's get up to date. And they bought Ford LaFrance fire trucks. So they have all of these garbage. They have all these fire horses, and they say, well, what are you going to do with them? And he said, well, we're going to make them pull the garbage wagons. And that was great. It was working out until there was a fire. And as they said, those horses smelled the smoke and the cinders, and they heard the sirens, and they lit out. Huh. And they were racing the trucks, and they were trying to get to the fire. So
interesting.
Yeah.
What I was calling about was I just got back from Nicaragua. I go down quite often, actually. My buddies and I go surfing down there.
Oh, wow.
And it's a neat little, I don't know, it's a country that I've really become to love and know a lot about now, and one of those deals. And they are the freeway currently right now is there's a freeway down there, that's getting built. The wind just came up here in Golden. Anyway, the freeway, there's the Chinese and the locals were talking to us about it down there, and the Chinese are funding and paying for that freeway down there.
And when they do things like that, they leave.
That's what you admit. That's what prompted my call, because you said so that's interesting. You know what I mean? Because I think, I think you're right on that. You know what I mean?
They built a railroad in Africa I'm trying to think which country. And when they were done building the railroad, they left. And the United States would hang around and try and run the railroad and tell people how to run the railroad and who can use the railroad. And
that's a very interesting point.
No, but the Chinese, and I'm not defending the Chinese, but that's how they did it.
Sure. Well, we'll see. You know what I mean? You don't see a ton of Chinese people down there in Nicaragua, per se. You know what I mean? Really, but
it's still they're interesting. I know that there's an attempt now to manufacture the Chinese into the next great enemy. And that was under McCarthyism. We've done all of that before. But interestingly enough, the Chinese do not have a history of fighting expansionist wars. We fought the Chinese in Korea. But if you read the Chinese, they saw the U.S. as coming to them, and they were going to beat the Chinese, in crossing over for Thanksgiving. But they've never fought an expansionist war, or don't
Right.
fight expansionist wars. I don't know if that still holds up, but
Right.
I'm far less afraid of the Chinese than I can name other organizations and people that scare me a hell of a lot more than the Chinese.
Hey, have you seen that movie?
Yes.
I just watched it the other day. Fury, the World War II one.
Yes, I've seen it a couple of times. I think it's just an incredible film.
I just seen it for the first time the other night, and it was good. It's my grandfather was a Harley scout.
Yeah.
And he rode on the front lines. And Mike, I got a question for you. He didn't, and they started in North Africa just like they did in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
But he went through Sicily and then to Salerno Beach, Italy, is where my grandpa went on the beach there. And then they went up through Naples and Rome and did that whole campaign, the Italian campaign. And have you ever read up on that campaign? Because if you do a little, then they say it wasn't very good and this, that, and the other thing.
I think the commander was Mark Clark, and he wasn't considered. He looked the part. He was like Westmoreland. He looked the part, and he was a favorite. And they gave him, what was it, Salerno, I think, where they wouldn't get off the beach. And there's all these things about Mark Clark. He wasn't one of America's finest commanders.
No, they didn't like any of their higher ups. I mean, it's kind of what the grandpa was saying. I mean, the one guy they literally called "Go to Hell," like that was his name. That's how they referred to him. They never did say his name. It was "Go to Hell." You know what I mean?
Sure.
And that was.
Well, they not every war produces these. Like these great. Yeah, I was reading in D'Estes' book. How old do you think Eisenhower was at Normandy?
I don't know, 45.
51.
Yeah.
That's a really young man.
Yeah.
And there he was. George Patton was older than he was.
One thing I learned about my grandpa just recently, and I think it was something I'd heard, but I guess the older I am now, I realize the gravity of the situation or whatever. But so he rode Harley all the way up into Germany. So watching that movie, he was the one that ran alongside the tank. They got rid of because their higher ups came down the line, whatever, and they took the motorcycles away as they approached Germany because the snow was coming in or whatever. And so he went to foot soldier at that point. And then, but later they was driving a Jeep, I guess. And so when they got to Hitler, apparently, or whatever, so my grandpa was the guy that he drove the Jeep that went up and picked up Goring to drive him down to the Nuremberg trial. And I'd never looked up into any of that stuff, so I was just amazed how that all.
Because in the end, somebody slipped Goering the poison.
Yep, he was the only one. No. He was the only one that did that. And then another weird thing is the guy that designed the trap door and all that.
Yep.
They hung all those guys, and apparently, if you look at all the accounts,
drunken bum.
They took like 32 minutes to kill him. The ropes were too short or something.
He was a drunken bum. He was.
Is that what they call it?
Yeah, he was a drunken bum, but Himmler also got poison, and they had him for 3 days before he used it. But one of the guards, slipped Goering the poison, and he took cyanide. But no, the American hangman was a quote drunken bum. He didn't know how to tie knots. He didn't know anything, and he almost relished killing those guys. There's just. It's what was somebody said? It wasn't what you knew; it's what you don't know. What you don't know that makes that makes it what it is. Hey, great call. So many wonderful calls this morning. Thank you so much for your time. Really means a lot to me. Thanks, man. Be safe. All right. So, what do you want to do here? You want to do the pauserama? We got. All right, we'll do the break now, and we'll come back and talk about Dan, and then we'll pull this puppy together. 710 KNUS, Denver's talk station. I'm guessing at the time here, 11:54. Whoa, Peter. 710 KNUS Weather Center weather, 54 tomorrow, 58 and 47 on Monday. Are you ready? Do it, Adam. It's noon, and good afternoon, everyone. 710 KNUS Denver Talk Station. I am Peter Boyles, December the 28th, 2024. Lines are jammed, 710 KNUS. It's been just an incredible show. Started out this morning with Professor Smith, the history of Panama, which I thought was tremendous. Then the amount of people who jumped into the show who had been to Panama, and open lines just ran on and continued. So 303-696-1971. Lines are full. We're going to start with, is it Rick on line one? Terry on line two. All right, Terry on line two, and you're on the radio show. Good afternoon, and thank you.
Hi, Pete. How are you?
I'm well, man. Thank you.
Hey, Pete, you hit on something that, and we've talked about this before when, that leap from, well, not a leap, but, 50s going into 60s, Kennedy's killed, then you have the Summer of Love and Vietnam and all that. I've been doing a little deep dive on the Manson stuff.
Ooh.
Remember he isolated them at the ranch?
Oh, sure.
And basically, I listened to some of the interviews of Van Housen, the lady's name. Was that the lady's name? Leslie Van Housen?
Absolutely.
And Susan Atkins, which was a monster in my opinion. But anyway, they took hundreds of LSD trips. Apparently, he would give them LSD and then brainwash them, with some of the stuff he would do. But I was going to ask you, what do you think how do you think things changed when all these drugs were kind of let loose in the 60s? Like in that later part of the 60s, people just started, it just seems like that wasn't around in the 50s, was it? When you were, when you were growing up, right?
No, it was there. There's a whole theory. If you want to see an example of a kingdom destroyed, it's the Chinese. And I've talked about this before. It's a belief that the British and the United States of America brought opium into China. And it started out to be something that the Mandarin class would do and give them a year or two, and they had it down to the coolie class. And there was something called the Opium Wars, and the Portuguese won Macau, was their colony. The British got Hong Kong. And the Americans, it's the game that we play, the imperial game that we play. And the American government had, or the American institutions had, trading posts inside of China. And we, in essence, force, and you don't have to force somebody when they're smoking opium, but we got even. We got them addicted. And I think it was the beginning, the Boxer Rebellion and the siege of Beijing and the demise of the empire. Well, Chinese have memories that are infinitely longer than anyone in this country. And I personally believe that them putting fentanyl in this country and killing our young people is a revenge game for what the United States and the British did with opium. And you're right. And when drugs hit, and I remember it very well, and pretty soon people were smoking a lot of pot, and then other stuff showed up, and then people had LSD and then they start taking chemicals and there's nothing you're not going to say that I'm not going to say. You're right.
Yeah, Pete, it just seems to me like, and you know better than me because I was born in 1964. You were there before me, but the 50s, and then I think you're right. When Kennedy was killed, or assassinated, and then it just kind of went a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you had the Vietnam thing, and then in the Summer of Love. What brought that Summer of Love on, that 67 thing?
It was. I think it was. Was it 60? Yeah, it was 67. That the Haight-Ashbury Summer of Love, and I think it all But remember, there's a more important variable in that, and it's the civil rights struggle. The two principal is the war in Vietnam and the civil rights struggle, and they were not to be denied. That was going to happen.
Right.
And then, of course, Nixon feeds them up Watergate. And it's
I'll tell you, Pete. That LSD, from what from the the Manson thing, he turned those women into monsters.
Oh.
I mean, what they did in those crimes, it's beyond anything I can imagine. I don't know if we've had anything that compares to that, have we? That was a horrible crime. Those two crimes of the LaBiancas and the Tate thing. It was horrible.
You remember in the LaBiancas? I don't know if you ever read Helter Skelter.
I have not read it.
And you okay? Then you know. And Charlie would send them in to play. What did they call it? They called it not touchy feely, but they called it. They named a game, and they crawled around the LaBianca's house before they murdered them. And I think they went up and they touched their feet or something. Creepy crawlies. They called it creepy crawlies. And they would crawl around people's homes at night when the lights were out. And they went to kill the wrong people when they killed who they killed. The point is that it was Charlie. And it gets back to something we talked about last Saturday, the notion of the leader. History is full of the leader. Whether it's, the Fuhrer is the best example of the leader. But the leader is also Joe Stalin, Hirohito. I can give you tons of people that are the leader.
Jim Jones.
Jim Jones is a great example of being the leader. There's something, again, about us. And I think it's true, about being alcoholic myself, that there's something about us that we need that. There's a part of it that needs us. As you know, the Marxists were trying to actually develop a new man. The Fuhrer was developing a new man. There's no question they were developing a new man.
He was on drugs himself, wasn't he? Not
sure.
Pete?
Oh,
Hitler.
yeah. Oh, yeah. He had Morel, I think, was his doctor's name. But so was Jack Kennedy. When Jack Kennedy, they called that doctor Feelgood. And when he went to Paris to meet Khrushchev, and he's in trouble because of the shoot downs, and they take Morel on a separate airplane. And he shot them up the whole time that he and Jackie were there. And there's also something called MK Ultra. Have you ever read about that?
No, what is that a CIA thing?
Just absolutely. And Whitey Bulger, the legendary murderer Whitey Bulger. Whitey was, and I didn't know this until about a year ago, when Whitey went to Atlanta, the penitentiary in Atlanta, he volunteered for MK Ultra. And he did like 35 or 40 acid trips. And his principal murderer was a guy called the Rifleman. And what was his name? The Rifleman was, it'll come to me. Stevenson, I think, was his last name. And they later interviewed him. And he said, when Whitey came home from the penitentiary, and he did the LSD to get good time. He got time off. And he said he was far worse than he'd ever been before. And it doesn't surprise me.
Well, Pete, that Susan Atkins that was involved in those murders, she was beyond anything. Do you think the LSD just sent her over the edge?
Don't you think that there are people that are willing to do that? And certain drugs or certain amounts of alcohol or something that alters them, maybe something they've been through.
That Squeaky Fromm loved Manson to death. She said she'd do anything for him.
Lynette Squeaky Fromm. Huh? Why do you? I have no idea why I remember stuff like that, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, do you think you're?
I do think once that was introduced pretty heavily in the 60s, I don't think we've ever been the same. And I'll be honest with you, since they legalized marijuana in this town, and I've lived here my whole life, this town has not been the same since that marijuana legalized, in my opinion.
What? But again, when people want something and you can't stop it,
right?
That's what makes the small d Democrat democracy. I mean, your questions are the principal questions, Terry. I don't have answers.
I know you don't, and I don't think I do either. But I agree with you. When there's a craving or a lust, I think that's the word that I wanted to use. When there's a lust for something, like you elaborated, when there's a lust for something, they're going to do it whether it's good or bad, right?
Yeah, and read, if you get a chance, read what the British East India Company and the American, there's an awful lot of Americans that owe their fortunes to the opium trade. Franklin Roosevelt's great-grandfather, I think one of the Bushes, a number of these people made their money, and it was considered perfectly okay because these men were yellow, and you could sell them the drugs.
Just a quick hit before I go, but I wanted to tell you, I read a little bit. Do you remember? I think it was Abigail Folger's.
Oh yeah, sure, of course. Yes.
She was the heiress to the Folger coffee. I just wanted to throw that in just to remind you. So. Oh
no, she died too.
Yeah, she was killed at the Tate.
Yeah,
at the Tate House.
Yeah. Oh no, of course.
It's crazy, isn't it? Anyway, thank you, sir. You have a wonderful day. Thank you.
You're kind. Thank you. 303-696-1971. Danny Kaplis. I promised I'd say one more thing about Danny, but I tell you, when you got to choose a lawyer who shares your values, and because you choose to represent you in an injury, it says so much about you and everybody involved in the case. Dan's dad was a cop when he had this great mom, and he dedicated the last 40 years of his life to helping people who are hurt in serious accidents, motor vehicle cases, and he comes like the wind. When my family had some issues, and there he was. Danny's believed to be the only lawyer in Colorado history to write 5 straight multi-million-dollar verdicts in Colorado truck and car crash cases. Dan's also believed to have won the largest truck crash verdict in Colorado history. Kaplis is the official law firm of the Denver Nuggets and Colorado Avalanche. Dan Kaplis Law is a serious firm for serious people. I mean, I can't tell you what a job he did for us, and he accepts again righteous cases on percentage fee basis. He is such a good man. He can represent real good people from all real good walks of life without any ability to pay. Call Danny, 303-770-5551, 303-770-5551. Or it's Kaplis, is CAPLIS law.com. Here we go. 54 the high, 58 tomorrow, and 47 on Monday. 710 KNUS, we are Denver's talk station. For the first time, probably since 9 o'clock, we actually have two lines open. 303-696-1971. You can join the show. Let us go to Ken in Colorado Springs. Hey, Ken, thanks for waiting. You're on the air. Your turn.
Thank you, Peter. It was worth the wait.
Huh.
Listen, you're talking this morning about the Kennedy assassination. And, I've heard a lot on talk radio about the subject, okay? But I've never heard anybody mention what I want to share with you.
Okay.
This goes back to the 70s. Now, Peter, I'm 81 years old.
Me too. Me
so
too.
I've been around a while, right? And back in the 70s, a guy, and I'm pretty sure his name was Hugh McDonald, if my memory serves, wrote a little book. He had to self-publish thing because nobody'd touch it with a 10-foot pole. And it was about the actual assassin. He interviewed the actual assassin. Now, this guy that wrote the book, I think his name was Hugh McDonald, he was the chief of detectives, LAPD. So, he's a really legit guy. His history was, during the war, he was in intelligence. So he had a lot of contacts and a lot of resources and stuff still in Europe. He had made a lot of friends back there in the war. And he got a call one time from an old friend and said, Hugh, I know who actually killed Kennedy, and I can get you an appointment with him. Then the book goes on to describe the appointment. He goes to Europe, he meets with the guy. The guy is totally insignificant. He didn't even know who he was paying him. The fee was $25,000. And the setup was to be that, what's his name up in the book tower there, okay?
Chuck Whitman.
Yeah. He was to fire, not to kill, but to fire. And then the local cops, etc., were supposed to return fire. And under the cover of that return fire, our assassin shot and killed Kennedy. Now, I can't remember the name of the book. I had 2 copies of it back then. And unfortunately, I've lost them. But he was Hugh McDonald. He was the chief of detectives at LAPD. Your research people yourself should be able to find that.
Right.
Okay. Now, if I can have 30 seconds of your time.
You got it.
I'm the guy that called you about the book, The Dragon's Prophecy.
Oh, sure. Last week. Yes.
Yes. I'm trying, and it's not easy. I'm trying to get this message to 3 people: President Trump, Ambassador Huckabee, and Prime Minister Netanyahu. I believe these 3 men are chosen for this time to be the shepherds of Israel in the spiritual warfare that's going on. And right now, it's at a peak. It's very, very important to the world what's happening with Israel right now. And Rabbi Kahn's book helps a human being see clearly, more clearly than ever, what's actually going on in the spirit. So I'd encourage you to read it yourself. And boy, I wish you could tell me how to get that message to those 3 men.
I can't answer the second one, but I'll do
Yeah, you can't just pick up a phone and say
no,
hi.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Doesn't work.
But I will do my level best on the first one. I'll try very, very, very hard. Fair enough?
Okay. Now, once you've done that, I think you're going to say, man, I'm really glad that I read that. Because it changes the way you see things, especially the fact that that assassination attempt and the fact that he lost in 20. Now I see clearly why he lost in 20. So we could experience the last 4 years and beg to have him or somebody like him back.
Take care of yourself.
It's incredible.
All right, sir.
All right, thank
you. You got it. All right, we go to Jim, line 1. Jim, you're on the radio show. Good morning or good afternoon.
Good morning, Peter. Thank you. Or whatever it is.
Yeah, take a shot.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll be quick. I listen to you constantly. It's funny, when I was in high school, I thought, what in the world would I want to study history for? What will it ever do for me? It's never going to make me a living. Well, it hasn't made me a living, but it's enriched my life.
Isn't it? I mean,
every week.
I tell people, when you read history, you're reading mathematics, you're reading science, you're reading economics, everything is. And not that I understand any of the above, but you read about it. No, I'm serious. It's part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So you give me great pleasure every Saturday morning when I get a listen to you. But seriously, my call was about something that you mentioned last week.
All right.
I can't remember who your guest was, but you mentioned a book that you were reading, Secrets of the CIA. I went to Barnes and Noble, and they had 30 or 40 titles similar to that. I was wondering
the guy's
if you
name.
could tell me who the author was.
Come on. What was it? What was that guy's name? Adam. He did the Frank Church book, and then he did. James Risen is the guy's name that wrote that. Risen. Risen. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
And also, there's a book entitled Legacy of Ashes.
Okay.
And it's the best, in my mind, the best CIA book I've ever read about what the CIA was really all about. And it's entitled The Legacy of Ashes.
Okay.
And the other book as well. But
yeah, but I will buy them both. I appreciate your history lessons every week. So, but it's nice to finally get to speak with you.
Well,
so I appreciate it.
But the CIA is state of war. State of war.
It's fascinating to me, and it's scary to me on the same token.
Remember what they've done.
Yeah, that's just it. I mean, it's scary stuff.
Oh, and they're unprincipled, and they are off the leash. And when Richard Nixon requested J. Edgar Hoover, he wanted Hoover to spy on American people that he would choose. And
of course.
And to his credit, Hoover said no. The CIA did it. And the CIA is their task, their charter is only foreign. The FBI is domestic. When Hoover said no, the CIA said yes.
Yeah.
And we don't know all what the CIA did in terms of American people. And then along comes when George Bush develops the biggest bureaucracy in the history of the country, Homeland Security.
Right.
He puts those guys in there and cuts them loose.
No, absolutely. Scary times, but I want to catch back up again. So again, I appreciate all my time with you on the weekends, and now I'm going to go grab these two books.
You're kind. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Right. We need a break. We need a pause. We need anything. Okay. No. Well, go ahead. Why don't we do a turnaround? 303-696-1971 is our phone number. This is your last chance to beat the other couple. Remember, Groucho Marx would say that. Here's what I would do. Call the show, 303-696-1971. You ready to go, Adam? Okay, right back. 12:34, everyone, 26 before the hour. And we're back here next week at 9 o'clock in the morning and got a couple of good ones on the lineup. Thank you to Adam. So it has been a really interesting day at Talk Radio. I always get to this part of it. And I think after doing this job for as many years as I've been lucky enough to have the job and do the job, I just get a chance to reflect on the shows. And that's not a secret, but it's, I think, probably the first time that we talk about it. And I'll talk to Adam. What do you think of the show? And, did we do this? Do we do that? And I always critique. And there's plenty of times I go, man, why'd I do that? Or why'd I say that? Or why'd I put that idiot on the air? And, any of those kind of things. But it's, you play yourself out. And one of the things that has struck me now for, I don't know, well over a decade, when you get into a free fall situation with talk radio, no matter, it will come back almost on its own to Kennedy. And I've made note of it. And I do have this theory, and I've talked about it. If you could go to academia and sit in the stacks all by myself and try and write a thesis, it would be, and a fellow called, a great caller, called about, when drugs hit. And between that moment in Dealey Plaza, when Jack Kennedy is murdered, hit, whatever you want, what do you want, whacked, assassinated, up until that second that Richard Nixon quits, when we know so much more about the end of Nixon than we do certainly the end of Jack Kennedy. But there's a time period there that sets the stage for all of these things we're watching now. And I do believe, I never heard the term deep state before. And that's been a recent last 3 or 4 years. It's the deep state. It's had lots of other terms. It's had, whatever you want to put a jacket on it, and you can feel comfortable with it. But when John Kennedy was killed, and we know that the establishment, which was the term everybody used back then, didn't like Jack Kennedy. They didn't like Jack Kennedy in the South. They didn't like Jack Kennedy. And they assassinated Jack Kennedy. And there seemed to be this period of our country that we were almost like a third world nation. To eliminate a political enemy, it was fair dinkum. You could kill them. Whether it was Dr. King, Bobby Kennedy, the attempt on George Wallace, the list goes on. Of course, Jack Kennedy, that you could kill your enemy. And that's something that's straight out of the third world. And yet, what was the United States doing? What was it doing in the first world? And what was it doing in the third world? And the SDS is created. If there wasn't any Richard Nixon, any war in Southeast Asia, there would have never been an SDS. One creates the other, creates the other. But here comes the American CIA and the American FBI. And the FBI is doing jobs on its own people. They're called black bag jobs, and they were being done. They did them to Edgar Hoover. They did them to all kinds of people. But when finally Hoover does say to Nixon, this is when Nixon's back is to the wall, and he knows he's not going. Well, he may know he's not going to survive, and he asks Hoover, Edgar, will you do these things for me? And Hoover was either erudite enough to see that this guy Nixon's done, or he'd do it for himself, but he wouldn't cross the line and do it for Nixon. The CIA, on the other hand, seemingly didn't have a problem. And a lot of those CIA guys become the White House plumbers. And everybody slips away. And everybody gets away. And Nixon gets away. And Nixon takes the presidential pardon. He takes Gerald Ford's pardon. And he goes on with his life. And the war in Vietnam gears up. And then what happened? Nothing. It ended. All these kids are dead. All these Asian people were dead. The country's been destroyed. Crimes against humanity have been committed. Lies have been told. Richard Nixon goes to that beautiful home in San Clemente. Agnew goes to jail. And what happens? Nothing. And they sit and they wait, and along comes George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. And what do? They do it again. They pull it off again. And they tell you lies. And they slip away. And now we have a guy going to be president the 6th of January. Let's hope. I'm not the biggest fan in the world, but if you'd have gotten Vice President Harris, what a run you would have had. So here comes this guy. I might be a little biased watching him in action, but somebody killed Jack Kennedy, and somebody killed Dr. King, and somebody killed Bobby Kennedy, and somebody did these things. And somebody lied us into a war in Southeast Asia and lied us into a war in the desert. And they're still out there. And they're still, if not them, then somebody just like them is doing that job. Maybe this man can pull the pin. Maybe this guy, maybe, can discover. Says he'll tell you. If you saw that interview with Bobby Kennedy, RFK Jr., sitting on the couch, he didn't even blink. The guy said, "Did the CIA kill your uncle?" And he said, "Yeah." I mean, he didn't even blink. I thought, I've seen that 5 times now, watching his eyes. And I thought, okay, this guy's either the best thing to come along or he's the worst thing to come along. But he didn't even blink. He just said yes. And then look, what was that line from Barry Maguire? Look around you, boy, because it's bound to scare you, boy. And so here we all are. We're starting on a new epoch in January. And if he doesn't, if he stays that guy, he's got a chance. If not, countries have no guarantees of lasting. And that was the one part of history that it took me a long, long time to get my arms around. Nothing lasts forever. Not dinosaurs, not mammoth elephants, not the British Empire, not the Soviet Empire. Not us. There is no guarantee written anywhere that says you're going to make a full pull. It could end, and everything could go with it. Or it could go on. The great line from Ronald Reagan about, the shining city on the hill. God, I love that speech. And it gave you the need to follow that up. He was the last guy, I think, to legitimately give hope to the country. Not the rest of these jokers, not the Bush family or Barack Obama or Bill Clinton or certainly not Joe Biden. But I think it was Reagan. Standing there, stud horse, man. I think he gave the country some promise. But we also now know that he didn't change those people up. They stayed inside. And there's always that level of those people that will stay and they will stay and they will stay. State Department, it just doesn't matter. But the CIA is the place you watch yourself. And the FBI is the place that you watch yourself. We okay? All right. How much time? We got 7 minutes left. Get out of here. I was doing a soliloquy. Somebody called this radio show. 303-696-1971 and pull my fat out of the fire. I got a bunch of email. I don't want to read them. They're just like, don't read these. These are, they'll try and make you feel good. So no, I won't read them, but you can join the show. 303-696-1971. I love some of these. They're very good, but that's, it's like, bleh. Reading them on the air, you're going to feel good. Don't do that. Why? So, this the kind of a conversation, it really does scare people. When I first started to read in this direction, and I would share it with people that I thought were, they were friends, and I would say to them, hear this or hear that, and it scared the hell out of them. You ready to go to work here? I'm going to do this. Adam's clearing up calls. All right, we go to, is it Frank? Frank in Denver. Frank, you're on a radio show. Thanks for pulling my bacon out of the fire. Thanks, brother.
Well, I love that guy from Texas. He's so good. First guest.
Yeah.
Have you heard of a guy named Brian Dean Wright?
No.
I heard him on another channel last night. He has a thing called the Wright Report.
Huh.
And if anything, he is very smart.
All right.
And well spoken. It's a podcast.
Okay.
You might have to pay for it.
All right.
But it's called the Wright Report, WRIGHT.
Okay.
And he's a former CIA guy many years ago. And those guys can be plants. They can say anything.
Sure.
And with the internet, you've got a perfect setup to leak any and all kind of information and ideas. But a guy named Sean Parnell was interviewing him, and he's a military guy. Was in the Marines.
Do it now. I got jam lines. Do it quickly, please.
Oh, I just was giving you that reference to let you take a look at him and see what you think of it.
Fair enough. Thank you. Have a good weekend, sir. Thank you. I let go to Gary on 2 and try and get everybody in. Gary, you're on a radio show. Good afternoon.
Hey, Peter, I want to lighten things up for you. And I know you love your grandson. And I wanted to give you a suggestion, a TV show that you and he would probably love. It's a comedy.
I'm ready.
It's called Reservation Dogs.
If that's the movie I'm thinking of, that's a pretty brutal movie, isn't it?
No, you're thinking of Reservoir Dogs.
Oh, okay. Yes, you are. You're absolutely right.
Think Indians, reservation dogs.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
And it's about 4 juvenile delinquent indigenous kids living on a reservation. You and your grandson will love it.
Oh, wow.
And it's streaming on Hulu or other platforms.
I will do that. What did I see that I thought? There is some really good stuff out there these days. I mean, and it's like, and the other thing too is you ever see Tubi, Tubi? They have all the 30s and 40s movies. And I would much rather watch those.
This one will, your grandson will really enjoy because it's 4 kids in his age group. And I guarantee you'll relive your youth and you'll laugh several times on every episode.
I promise, Gary, I will look at that. Matter of fact, I think he and I are going to watch the Broncos this afternoon, and we're going to watch CU after that. So, kid can't get enough watching football, and Grandpa falls asleep. So,
all right, you have a good one, Peter.
Thank you, Gary. Anyhow, lightening things up or turning things around. Thank you. especially when we have shows like this. And it just, I'll think about this show now for probably tonight. And by tomorrow it'll be gone. But I'll give it a lot of thought because I say this all the time, talk radio, no man its master. People that think they can master it have lost already, but it just takes off and goes. And there's a spirit, a geist that runs through it. And guys want to do it, man. They want to talk about it. It's still back to that unsolved moment between Jack Kennedy saying goodbye and Richard Nixon being booted out. It had all the significance in the world, at least for guys my age. All right, Adam, enough of this. Got to hit the bricks. Got to get some food in me. Got to watch football. All right? No, we're going to go now. I don't have any more gas. I'm out of gas. I don't have this. I mean, I don't make those shows emotional, and I'm going, holy smoke, what am I doing here? You know, spilling the beans on the future of the country. Here, give you an idea of the wonderfulness. The effing Broncos are going to lose out and not make it to the playoffs. Terrific. And I can not care, but I know this kid cares, and so I'll care. The effing Broncos are going to lose out and not make it to the playoffs. And then a little smiley face. All right. Say that again. Yeah, would you do that and get me out of here? All right, everybody. Have a good weekend. Here's the man.
My fellow Americans, this is the 34th time I'll speak to you from the Oval Office and the last. We've been together 8 years now, and soon it'll be time for me to go. But before I do, I wanted to share some thoughts, some of which I've been saving for a long time. It's been the honor of my life to be your president. So many of you have written the past few weeks to say thanks, but I could say as much to you. Nancy and I are grateful for the opportunity you gave us to serve. One of the things about the presidency is that you're always somewhat apart. You spend a lot of time going by too fast in a car someone else is driving and seeing the people through tinted glass, the parents holding up a child and the wave you saw too late and couldn't return. And so many times I wanted to stop and reach out from behind the glass and connect.